Romanian Eagle. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 376, The Outbreak of National Independence. In fact, the allied countries such as Britain and France are reluctant to talk about their desire for peace talks with Austria-Hungary, because all countries participating in the war have suffered heavy losses, except for the United States and a certain wall. It is urgent to find a place to supplement the losses. And Austria-Hungary, the main culprit that caused the war, has become the best target of the Entente because of its domestic contradictions, and after experiencing the lessons of this war, many people found that there are too many big powers in Europe, and if the friction and disputes between the big powers are enlarged, it may lead to a war. Therefore, for the sake of a stable and peaceful atmosphere in Europe, let's first demolish a big country. Therefore, the Austro-Hungarian peace talks failed completely, and Britain, France, the United States and other countries completely ignored their requests in China. Queen Zita's charitable activities to improve the image of the ladies with the ladies are also tepid. It is not denied that their actions have benefited many people, and their influence on the Habsburg family has changed. But amid the overwhelming opposition, these people couldn't make waves at all. And Queen Zita does not have the approachable image of Princess Sissi, nor her flexible methods. And her deliberately imitated gesture made many people dissatisfied. One of the newspapers in Prague commented, Queen Zita's deliberate imitation of Sissi in front of the public makes people uncomfortable, and in the face of various emergencies, the Queen will only behave like a puppet following other people's arrangements. There is absolutely nothing like a queen of a country. The Austro-Hungarian Empire's foreign and domestic response did not play its due role at all, which made nationalists and careerists everywhere more reckless. On July 12, lawmakers in Prague's parliament are in a pivotal meeting to discuss the region's independence. This is a word that haunts Czechs, and the blood of many martyrs has been glued to this word. In the 5th and 6th centuries, the Slavs moved westward to the Czech and Slovak regions, and slowly formed today's Czech and Slovak nation. From the end of the 9th century to the first half of the 10th century, after the disintegration of the Great Moravia Empire, the Primers family established the Czech Principality with Prague as the center, and the name Czech also appeared in front of the world. In 1086, the German King Henry IV of the Holy Roman Empire awarded the Czech Prince Vladislav II the title of King of Bohemia. Bohemia is the Latin and Germanic name for the Czech Republic, after which the Czech Principality surrendered in the Holy Roman Empire. In 1620, the combined forces of Bohemia, Czech Republic, and the Palatinate were defeated in the Battle of the White Mountains, and the Czech Republic entered the territory of the Habsburg dynasty, which has remained until today. During the reign of the Habsburgs, the national awakening in the Czech Republic is not too slow. At the beginning of the 19th century, the Czech national culture gradually developed, and many intellectuals devoted themselves to the study of Czech history and language, which promoted the national awakening. In 1845, the petty bourgeois radical revolutionary political group Libery began its activities, and its leader was Fritsch. In 1848, the February Revolution in France inspired the whole of Europe. All countries declared the revolution of the bourgeoisie, and the revolution broke out in the Czech people as well. However, this revolution made the Czech Republic still obey the Habsburg family for various reasons, and Fritsch's remarks about Czech independence were ignored by everyone. Today, these Czech parliamentarians will cast a valuable vote for the independence of the region. On the stage of the parliament, the leader of the Czech Progressive Party, who secretly returned from abroad, will serve as the 3-term Czech president in the future. Until Masaryk, who can't do anything, is standing here, giving a generous speech to the parliamentarians in the crowd. My compatriots, today is a holy day, a day when we Czechs decide our own destiny. From today on, we don't have to bow down to anyone, and we don't have to do anything without obeying the emperor's will. Today we want to cheer for our independence. Long live the Czech Republic. Long live the people. Long live the Czech Republic and the people. Masaryk's words successfully raised the voices of the people. Everyone made their own cries. This voice was so real and full of their hopes. Masaryk was very satisfied with the situation. After the shouting died down, He declared loudly, "It is now up to the parliamentarians to vote on whether our Czech region should be independent." After Masaryk's voice fell, someone in the crowd shouted independent. This sentence ignited the enthusiasm of the crowd, and then louder and more tidy voices sounded independent. Faced with this situation, the MPs present knew what choices to make. Many of them signaled to the crowd the votes that said they agreed to be independent before putting them into the ballot box. And the actions of these congressmen have made the voice of independence even louder. Masaryk stepped aside to watch the votes of the MPs with his deputy, Stefanik, and the leader of the National Party, Benz. "I have spoken to the leaders of other parts of the country and they will also hold an independence vote in the final days." Benz, who was on Masaryk's side, told him what he had done. "Thanks, you're welcome. This is all to ensure the independent cause of the Czech people. I didn't expect your decision to be the right one." Facing Benez's words, Masaryk replied, "I can't say my decision is correct, and this is the choice of the people. I just let the people speak their inner voice. Yeah, it's the people's choice." Benz thought about the days when they fought for Czech independence, and now that he finally saw Czech independence happening right in front of him, he felt that it was all worth it. And Masaryk felt the same way. And he knows that now is the first step for Czech independence, and there are a lot of things they need to do next. But there is one very important thing right now, which is a top priority. I saw Masaryk turned his head and asked Stefanik on the other side, "The next conscription must be done quickly." "I'm almost done. We are ready for the 200,000 places. After the independent voting is completed, it will be issued by the order of the interim government immediately." Stefanik's words temporarily calmed the hearts of Benz and Masaryk. All three know that the current vote is only to go through the legal situation, and no one can stop Czech independence. But after independence, defending the results is a matter of urgency. The result of their deliberations was that they recruited troops to form their own armed forces. As for the Czech soldiers and officers in the Austro-Hungarian army, they were mainly called by patriotism. In this way, after mobilization, the Czech Republic has at least a certain ability to protect itself. It will allow Austria-Hungary and Germany to have more concerns when considering intervening in Czech independence. The result was not unexpected, and all the MPs present voted for independence. Then the newly baked Czech government was announced in parliament, and a photo of Masaryk, Benz and Stefanik hugging and cheering for Czech independence appeared in the newspaper the next day. At the same time, there is a bold title on it, "Czech Independent Big 3." After the independence of the Czech Republic, Croatia and Slovenia also declared their independence and formed their own governments. The success of independence finally aroused strong dissatisfaction in Hungary. Croatia and Slovenia are both territories of the Kingdom of Hungary. To this end, Prime Minister Tisza of the Kingdom of Hungary sent a message to Carol requesting that the empire must do something about it. And Carol is completely overwhelmed now because something big has happened in Austria. Chapter 377 The Defeat of Austria-Hungary 1. To Carol's predicament, the situation in Austria also deteriorated. The Austrian political party, led by Karol Seitz, the leader of the Social Democratic Party, announced to the people that it would change the political system in Austria. According to him, that is the right of the people of Austria to choose the political structure they want. The decision of the Austrian party made Carol panicked. Because of the current attitude of the people towards the empire, there is a high possibility that Austria will become a republic. Once Austria becomes a republic, the disintegration of the empire will become inevitable. To this end, after deliberation with the important ministers in the cabinet, Carl I decided to announce his acceptance of the 14th peace treaty of US President Wilson. In order to show that the empire attaches importance to and respects the voice of the people, Carl decided to announce the decision at the Imperial Parliament building. So under the protection of the soldiers, Carol I was on his way to the Parliament building. I don't know if doing this will restore the last dignity of the Habsburg family. Carol I looked at the protesters who were blocked by soldiers outside the car and fell into contemplation. These are the same people who were cheering for their ascension to the throne 2 years ago. They also denounced Serbia after the assassination of their uncle, Archduke Ferdinand, and cheered for the empire's participation in the war after the outbreak of the war. Now they have become opponents of the empire. This is the people of the empire. They can cheer for your victory. They can also curse and rebuke for your defeat, wondering if they can save the fate of the Habsburg family. By doing so, point your majesty, here we are. When Carol was worried about the Habsburgs, the guard's words interrupted the state point. After returning to God, Carl said, when he saw that the motorcade had stopped under the Parliament building, "Let's go down." Point after the crowd protesting in the square of the building saw Carl's figure, the somewhat drowsy head that had been tanned by the sun immediately recovered. Point we want bread, not war, we want peace. Point let the empire go to hell. Point a wave of heart-rending protests rushed towards Carl, who walked out of the car door, making him almost lost his footing. Point be careful, your majesty. Point the sharp-eyed guard next to him immediately supported Carl and whispered. Point Carol, who was supported by the guards, turned his head and said thanks. When the crowd in the square saw this, the sound of the demonstration resounded through the sky, as if they were planning to shock the emperor to death. Point this made Carl's face a little unnatural. Point your majesty, don't worry about these deceived subjects, we still have more important things to do. Point seeing the abnormal expression on his monarch's face, Earl Lawrence, the court chief who followed him, comforted him in a low voice. Point to the Earl of Lawrence, who watched him grow up. Carl slowly recovered. He glanced at the crowd demonstrating in front of the Parliament building and replied, "I'm fine, let's go in." Point after entering the Parliament building, Carol, led by the President of the Parliament, Berlik, came to the podium, where he would announce the acceptance of President Wilson's terms by the Austrian-Hungarian government. Point Carol is no stranger to the Parliament building, where he became Emperor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But unlike before, this time he became persona non grata. Take a look at the councillors in front of him, many of whom he knows. In the past, these people competed for allegiance to him, but now these people have faces that are unfamiliar to him. There are even congressmen who are talking recklessly with others, which is an act that does not take him seriously. And these people all acted to make the whole of the Parliament noisy, completely like being in the market, not the hall of the Parliament. Point and the Speaker of Parliament Berlik saw this situation and felt a little rude, so he picked up the hammer and hit the table. A crisp percussion sounded, making the scene a little better. At least those who were unscrupulous and rhetoric with others restrained, and their voices became much quieter. The embarrassed expression became even heavier when the President of Berlik saw this. But there was only so much he could do, so he turned back to Carol. Point I'm sorry, your majesty. Point as for the old council president's apology, Cole glanced at the congressman who didn't care about him at all before replying, "It's none of your business, councillor. They are venting their dissatisfaction with me." Point after sending off the Speaker of Parliament, Carl stood alone in front of the podium. The attitude of these members made him very disappointed, but the current situation has reached a critical moment for Austria-Hungary. Whether the status of the empire and the Habsburg family can be preserved this time depends on this decision. Point what Kerr saw on the street and in Parliament made him pessimistic about the outcome. But for saving the Habsburg family, he will not give up until the last moment, because he has no way out. Point after sorting out his thoughts, Carol ignored the dissatisfied parliamentarians and said in a sincere tone, "Dear parliamentarians, this war that has affected the whole of Europe, because of our dispute with Serbia, has made everyone feel it to grief. Someone lost a son, someone lost a husband, someone lost a father, and these were sacrifices for the empire." Point here I need to say sorry to these soldiers and people who died fighting for our country. The empire is sorry for your selfless sacrifices, because this war has caused many people in the country to endure hunger, severe cold, extreme heat and pain, all of which are the evil consequences of this war. The current desire for peace among the people makes the empire feel that this war is not worth it, that it is not worth these sacrifices. There are not many people who hold the same compassion. There are many people in our country who have called on this to let go of their obsessions and let us embrace peace. And now the empire feels the voice of these people. On the side of the allied powers too, many people called for peace. For example, President Johnson of the United States is one of them, and he also set 14 peace proposals for us. Now, after careful consideration, the empire has decided to accept President Wilson's suggestion. Let us put down our obsessions and embrace a peaceful world together. Carl's emotional words caused the council to gradually quiet down. Everyone listened to Karl speak out about popular expectations. When he said he accepted Wilson's 14 pieces of advice, applause gradually broke out in the parliament, and after the news spread outside, the demonstrators in the square became less impetuous. All this makes Carol, who left, feel that the situation may be improving. When the news reached the ears of Prime Minister Heinlein, who was staying at home and did not follow the emperor to the parliament, the politically savvy old guy had a different opinion. This is the people's expectation of peace, but not to the empire. Next, they will deprive the Habsburgs of their rights, because no one can appease them now. Only by bringing down the royal family can their anger be appeased. After the son next to him heard his father's prediction of the situation, he asked, "Father, will it really develop like this?" "You'll know when you see it next. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 378, The Defeat of Austria-Hungary, Part 2. Sure enough, the situation was exactly as Prime Minister Heinlein expected. After Carol accepted President Wilson's 14 recommendations, the political forces behind it immediately claimed that this was a helpless move by the Habsburg family to ensure their status and to evade responsibility for this war. More importantly, the Allies did not express their position on Carl's words, which made many people feel very worried. Just 3 days after Karl announced his acceptance of Wilson's 14 recommendations, also in the Parliament building, a new proposal is being debated before the final vote. I'm against changing Austria to a republic. A congressman voiced his opinion hoarsely. And the congressman's words immediately attracted a counterattack. Do you want to continue to stay in the kingdom? You can guarantee that the Habsburg family will not regain power. Or you can leave room for the Habsburg family to operate for your own selfish desires. The royalist congressman, seeing that he was a Republican congressman who refuted him, immediately defended, "This is not to leave space. My opinion has already included restrictions on imperial power. The Habsburg family will give up the right of allegiance to the government and the military, and leave that right to our parliament and only keep the nominal leader of the country. How can that leave room for maneuver?" The words of the royalist lawmaker won the approval of some neutral lawmakers in this proposal for a political structure. The royalists made significant concessions in order to keep the Habsburgs from being punished. First, they divided the rights currently possessed by the Habsburgs according to the political structure of the Kingdom of Sweden. They assigned military power to the government, and they assigned the leadership and oversight of the government to the parliament. He only retains the right to his reputation, and he also handed over a lot of property of the Habsburg family to the government in the name of needing relief for the suffering people. However, the royalist proposal was rejected by the Republicans. Their reason is that the Habsburg family has taken a lot of property from the government over the years, which belongs to the people, so the property of the Habsburg family needs to be assigned to the government. In addition, for the rights of the Habsburgs, these people are unwilling to give even the nominal monarch. It was directly rejected on the grounds that the republic was suitable for the current Austria. Therefore, the royalists can only deny the republic first, otherwise the Habsburg family will not even have a place to stay. But how do you guarantee that the Entente will not hold the Habsburgs accountable? If they were still monarchs, wouldn't these responsibilities be taken by the government? Faced with the language of the Republicans' coercive inquiries, the congressman also retorted, "Then how do you know that the Entente Congress will hold Habsburg accountable?" I'm here for the people's consideration. You are making a fool of yourself. You're the mess. What did you say? I'm talking about Yao court death. Oops, a good debate immediately turned into a boxing match, which made the parliament hall even more lively. Pull them off. The president of Berlik watched the two members who had quarreled because of their political differences and then had physical contact and quickly asked the guards to pull them away. The two members who were pulled apart were disheveled. One had a bruised left eye and the other was bleeding from the corner of his mouth. Looking at the actions of the two, the president of the parliament, Berlik himself, had some impetuous emotions flooding into his heart. I saw him on the podium and said to the members present, "This proposal is very important. It is related to our future system issues. and it is very difficult for us to make such an important decision once in a life. So I implore you all to discuss peacefully and stop making this sacred parliament noisy like a market point. Berlich's words did not make the two sides put down the scene of the dispute, but only minimized physical contact. And the president of the Berlich parliament can do nothing about this scene. Since the past year, there has been no peace in the parliamentary discussion. However, they have not been the president of the council for a few days, so let them go. Thinking of this, the president of Berlich felt that he was also disheartened. Debates and disputes will come to an end. When the time for debate is up, the vote is announced by the Berlich Assembly Speaker. These MPs can only wait quietly for the results after voting. At this moment, it seemed that the parliament had finally returned to its original appearance, and only the tellers were counting the votes. 1 vote for a republic. The kingdom has 1 vote. The kingdom has 2 votes. 2 votes in a republic. 3 votes in a republic. A total of 263 people participated in this vote. After counting, 167 votes were in favor of the republic system and 96 votes in the kingdom system. After counting the votes, the teller announced the result of the vote. This result naturally cheered the Republicans, while the Royalists were downcast. After the teller finished speaking, the Speaker of Parliament Berich took the stage and said in a calm tone, "Everyone knows the result. I hope everyone present will respect the result of this sacred vote. My words are finished." After the Speaker of Parliament Berich finished speaking, the Royalist leader called a young man and said, "Tell your majesty the result. This time we really have nothing to do." After the young man nodded, he immediately rushed to the Hofburg. Today, the Habsburg family is anxiously waiting for the result of the parliamentary vote. When the results were passed to the Hofburg, the people of the Habsburg family who were waiting for the news all had expressions of panic and anxiety, as if the end was coming. Someone was crying on the spot, "How can this be done? Thinking of myself, who has always been pampered, will rush for life in the future," which caused many people present to shed tears. The cries of the Habsburg family present, and the actions of these clansmen annoyed Caroline. "Okay, stop crying. Let's think about what we are going to do next." Karl's words stopped the crying clansmen, and looked up at the young patriarch. An older clansman suggested, "Why don't we go to lobby again, and let the parliament vote again?" This unreliable proposal was refuted by a young clan before Karl could answer. "That's impossible. What are you supposed to be in parliament? Those Republicans can still get us to vote again. If I say, let the army, that is still loyal to us, control the parliament and directly overturn this result, then the compensation for Britain and France will be more losses. I'm sure they'll agree." Karl almost fell over when he heard it. This proposal is even more unreliable than the last one. All this time, these people are still reluctant to bear these powers. For this he had to speak. "It looks like we can't continue living in Austria. Let's think about where to move temporarily." And if Carol admits the decision of the parliament, the Habsburg people present have no other ideas. At this time, some people proposed to go to Germany to avoid it, and some people retorted that it is better to go to Spain than to go to Germany. For a while, there was a lot of debate about where to go, and some people even proposed to go to Romania, on the grounds that Carol's sister Sophie Mary was the Queen of Romania. Cole was bewildered by these people's proposals, and even scolded the people who proposed to go to Romania. Romania is currently at war with Austria-Hungary. What is it to go to Romania by himself? The pride of the Habsburg family makes him unable to accept this proposal. After everyone was scolded by Karl, only then did a sensible person say, "Let's see which country is willing to accept us at this time." Everyone realized that it is not just a question of their willingness to go, but who is willing to accept their hot potato is the problem. Karl made a decision at this point. "Let's decide. First ask which country is willing to let us temporarily avoid it." Subsequently, the Habsburg family sent an application for asylum to the currently neutral country, but many countries did not reply, and only a few countries agreed to their request. After comprehensive consideration, Karl took out a receipt agreeing to their asylum and said, "That's it." Everyone sees that this is a Swiss receipt. As a famous neutral country in Europe, this is also the best choice for the Habsburg family. And Karl didn't say a word in his heart. Switzerland is the closest to Austria. As long as there is a chance in the future, the Habsburg family can return to Vienna as soon as possible. It seems that Carol is also quite unwilling to hand over power to the Habsburgs. Chapter 379 Whale Swallow 1. News of the Habsburgs being expelled from Austria spread rapidly in Europe. For the departure of this political family that has influenced the European continent for nearly 1,000 years, some people are happy and some are sad, but this cannot affect the determination of the Entente countries to deal with Austria-Hungary. However, before sharing this cake, the Allied powers did not forget that the Allied powers still have a strength above him. Therefore, when Austria-Hungary was still in turmoil, when the Habsburg family was not expelled, the Allied forces with Britain, France and the United States as the main force, launched a counterattack on the Western Front. They planned to drive Germany out of French territory first. At the same time, they also planned to contain the German army from other directions, and Romania, which seems to be brave and good at present, will naturally not be let go by them. So when Austria-Hungary was in turmoil, the Allied powers asked Romania to launch a war request to contain the German troops on the Eastern Front, and it was put on Edel's table. Edel looked at this request and was a little dissatisfied with it. Romania has fought many battles in just over 8 months since the start of the war on the Eastern Front. Although the harvest was not cheap, the accumulated casualties were not small. After all, Romania has a population of just over 10 million and cannot experience casualties like those on the Western Front. The newly occupied areas have not yet been counted. However, he could not directly refuse the request of the Allied powers. The main reason is that Romania has its own plan and needs to use a lot of troops. Therefore, it is more resistant to the demands of the Allied countries. It made Edel want to resist the plan requested by the Allies, which is also a manifestation of Romania's soaring strength. In this world, where the law of the jungle is popular, being weak is the original sin. If Romania wants to be rich and powerful, it must have enough living space. And Edel is somewhat coveted for the former Russian territory that is still in German hands. So after receiving a request from the Allied countries that Romania wanted Romania to contain the German troops on the Eastern Front, Edel decided to discuss with Admiral Ploiesti. When Admiral Prezhan arrived at the palace, Edel showed him the request of the Entente. Chief of Staff, what do you think of this telegram? After reading the telegram and Ploiesti, Edel asked with concern. In response to Edel's inquiry, Admiral Prezhan said with a smile, "It's very simple. It depends on whether His Majesty is willing to fight them." The Chief of Staff's words made Edel interested. Then, talk about it. Your Majesty, this telegram only asks us to contain the German troops on the Eastern Front, but it doesn't say when we should launch an offensive to contain it, so this request still has room for manipulation. Go on. Actually, in the staff, there are several plans to take back our Romanian territory on the Eastern Front. The two most capable of executing them do not conflict with the requirements of the Allies, and we can implement them after appropriate revisions. The first plan, because of the turbulent situation in Austria-Hungary, we can transfer several standing divisions and technical arms that have been strengthened to the Transylvanian Army, to be strengthened to Admiral Kortoi's Moldavia Group Army. The advantage of this plan is that we can gather our troops and weapons and equipment together to form a heavy armored corps and oppress the opponent to make it either retreat or fight with us. The advantage of this plan is that it has enough strength to repel, and the disadvantage of the German army in Galicia is that the time is relatively slow and it is easy for the enemy to retreat. After talking about the first plan, Admiral Ploiesti took a sigh of relief and continued, our second plan is also to mobilize the Transylvanian army. However, the mobilized troops do not strengthen Moldavia. Instead, the army was formed into a separate unit. It turned over from the Transcarpathian Mountains and went straight to Lviv, the logistics supply center of the enemy. At the same time, the Moldavian army entangled the enemy's troops on the front line and did not give them back reinforcement. The advantage of this plan is that it can defeat the enemy, Mackensen, commanding the elite German troops on the Eastern Front, and remove the biggest obstacle for us to take back the territory. As long as the plan goes smoothly, even if it cannot be defeated, at least the opponent can be severely damaged. However, the disadvantage is that the actions of the two sides you must cooperate well, and you cannot carry heavy equipment when crossing the Transcarpathian Mountains, and there may be too much possibility of casualties. After Admiral Priest finished speaking, Edel fell into deep thought. However, he did not compare the advantages and disadvantages of the two schemes, but was thinking about the relationship between the end of World War I in his past life memory. In Edel's memory, the key point in Germany's defeat was the Kiel Marine Revolt. The reason for the sailors' uprising seems to be that there was an incentive for the defeat of Austria-Hungary. It was said at the time that after the defeat of Austria-Hungary, the German military and civilians were desperate for the situation, so this uprising broke out. Edel tried to recall the memories of the previous life, but after so many years, he had forgotten too many things, so he never remembered it. No way. Edel can only find through other methods. Chief of the General Staff, what is the current situation in Germany? Preshan did not know that the king would consider the situation in Germany at this time, but their general staff did not give up on the collection of German intelligence. So after Edel asked, Preshan said the information he had learned so far at present, the German army is under great pressure on the Western Front. The attack of the United States, Britain and France has caused them to lose a lot of key areas and troops. At present, the Allied forces on the Western Front have achieved a breakthrough in the area of the Marne, and they have advanced the front line by 80 kilometers. And the German army can no longer threaten the safety of Paris. This time the German army's performance in the battle was relatively poor, and it completely lost its previous fighting spirit, and many areas were voluntarily abandoned. Preshan's words still didn't give Edel a clue, so he continued to ask, what about the situation in Germany? After synthesizing the information of the intelligence department, Preshan said, at present, the domestic famine is relatively serious, and the people have grievances about it. Think about it, even the army eats carrots and horse meat as a delicacy, so you can imagine what the people in the country can eat. After listening to Preshan's explanation, Edel thought for a while and said, then let's take the first plan as the battle plan. We don't have to rush to fight the German army. Yes, your majesty. After hearing Edel's decision, Admiral Pre-Mountain naturally had no reason not to agree. After Preshan returned to the staff, he immediately sent a report to the Transylvanian army, asking them to mobilize powerful combat troops to reinforce the Moldavian army that was about to have a combat mission. And in order to make the Moldavian army have a better performance, Preshan also transferred Lieutenant General Ferit to General Courtois as his deputy. It seems that Lieutenant General Ferit is the one who has gained the most military exploits in this war, and he can be seen in almost every battle. I believe that after the war, it is not as simple as being promoted to general. He is likely to become the leader of the next army. As for the result, it depends on his personal grasp. Chapter 380 Whale Swallow 2. After the order of Admiral Pre-Mountain was issued, several units of the Transylvanian army with outstanding military achievements were transferred to the Moldavian army. The Cavalry Division, the 1st Guard Division, the 3rd Division, the 7th Division, and the Armored Brigade were all transferred away, leaving only a few standing divisions to cooperate with the mobilized troops to watch over the disaffected Austro-Hungarian army across the river. Moreover, in the telegram of Admiral Preshan, he also hinted to Admiral Salomik to try to drive the Hungarians in the occupied area to the west of the Tisza River. Of course, the only person who can make Admiral Preshan do this can only be our protagonist, His Majesty Edel. With the issuance of this secret order from Preshan, the Romanian army began a campaign to purge the newly occupied area of Hungary. Large numbers of Hungarians living in the area were expelled west of the Tisza River. According to Romanian requirements, these people are allowed to leave with their belongings. However, as most of the expelled Hungarians, their main assets are real estate such as houses and land. So this has led to a slump in real estate prices in the area, with Romanian nationals who were eligible to buy them flocking to snap up the properties they had been forced to give up. According to the statistics after the fact, from July 18th to June 19th, a total of 2.06 million Hungarians were expelled from the land. Its losses are between $554 to $637 million, which also brings down the hatred between Hungarians and Romanians. This hostile situation has continued into future generations, and even the two countries were unable to resolve the fact that the two countries were in the same camp during World War II. However, the strength of the two countries has produced a huge gap over time point, but this result was already expected by Edel. It is strange that such a large piece of territory has been drawn from the territory of Hungary, and it is strange that it is not hostile. Since it is already hostile, it is better to be more hostile. All these are the evil fruits that the Hungarians have planted themselves over the years. Look at the countries around the Kingdom of Hungary in the future, who has not driven out the Hungarians in this way, but Romania is the first to take the lead. And if there are too many Hungarians in the area, it will bring hidden dangers to the new territory point in Edel's inner planning for the future. The future must allow Romanians to occupy the 6th floor of the country. The remaining 4 layers are Ukrainians, Poles, Bulgarians, Hungarians and other ethnic groups, which is also a necessary condition for the country to maintain stability. In order to ensure this minimum ratio, it is not surprising that methods such as expulsion, suppression, inducement, and tampering are required. Those with strong national consciousness need to be repelled and suppressed, while those with weak consciousness can be differentiated and induced, or even directly tampered with. And Edel did everything to make Romania stronger. Romania's expulsion campaign in the newly occupied territories has attracted a lot of domestic and foreign public opinion and public attention. There are many accusations from these people, and Edel's solution to this is to cover up foreign news, guide and suppress domestic public opinion. Let these people who have enough to eat and have nothing to do, let them pay more attention to the soldiers on the front line who are fighting bloody battles for the country. Foreign people are paying attention to Romania's expulsion movement, but as a government, they have no time to pay attention to this. They focus on Romania's mobilization of troops on the railway from Transylvania to Moldavia, which circles the Carpathian Mountains. The trains run fast day and night. The loaded soldiers and the cannons, tanks and other equipment covered by raincloths all show that Romania is transporting troops. Of course, such a large-scale transshipment operation cannot be concealed from other countries, and Romania has no intention of concealing it. Take the armored brigade as an example. The transfer of the entire brigade's personnel and equipment requires 21 trains of 20 knots, not to mention the subsequent replenishment of ammunition and fuel. There are so many trains loaded with officers and soldiers and equipment. As long as you have the intention to observe. The move of Romania to dispatch troops naturally attracted the attention of Marshal Mackensen, who is currently in Wolof Point as the commander-in-chief of the German army on the Eastern Front. Marshal Mackensen currently needs his attention in addition to facing the Romanian army and the security of the territories seized from Russia. However, in the view of His Excellency the Marshal, the biggest threat still comes from Romania. Therefore, the energy is basically placed on the front line of Romania. As for other areas, there is some laissez-faire in it, so the current public security environment in these newly occupied territories can be imagined. However, no matter how poor the security environment in these places is, it is much stronger than the Russian Civil War. Marshal, Romania's current actions must be directed at us. What should we do? Inside the headquarters, the Chief of Staff, Major General Maximum Huffman, asked Marshal Mackensen for his opinion. After reading the information probed. Marshal Mackensen, who didn't wear his death hussar hat because of the heat, looked at the combat map and said calmly, "Then why did Romania come to us? Because we are the only threat around them." When Major General Huffman was questioned by Marshal Mackensen, a thought flashed by, and he immediately reacted, "You mean they just want to drive us out of Galicia?" Marshal Mackensen still agrees with Major General Huffman's ability. That's right. Eastern Moldavia, where the Romanians are the majority, they don't take it back first, because we are here to get in the way of their movement. Mackensen didn't give priority to the situation of the battle, but instead cared about East Moldavia, so Huffman couldn't help but ask, "So what do you mean, Marshal?" Facing the question from his Chief of Staff, Marshal Mackensen smiled slightly. "Why should we block these Romanians? Let them fight with the Ukrainians who feel the joy of independence. Whoever wins this territory will belong to whoever wins." Hearing the Marshal's decision, Major General Huffman said worriedly, "But what should we do with the instructions from Berlin?" "This is simple. We have not replenished our personnel and ammunition. The army is very angry and cannot continue to fight. Hearing the marshal's words, Major General Huffman nodded bitterly to agree with this statement. Since the signing of the peace treaty with Russia, the Eastern Front has been rarely replenished. Even the ammunition for the last attack on Romania was drawn from stocks in other regions. And the Marshal did not lie. After the last Moldavia campaign, Berlin did not replenish their loss of personnel and ammunition. If it wasn't for collecting some from other areas, the soldiers would have to use the captured spoils at present. The only thing that the German troops on the East Front are better than those on the West Front is that they eat better than the German troops on the West Front. Then I will send a message to Kyiv to have these Ukrainians send their troops to take over. Go. Chapter 381 Whale Swallow 3. Romanian Eagles. What? The Germans have retreated. Admiral Courtois, who was still waiting for the replenishment of troops and equipment in Suceava, asked in surprise after hearing the news. Can you be sure? The staff who reported the news immediately replied, it can be confirmed. Our intelligence officers in Chernovtsi, Lviv and other places found that the German troops were packing their bags, and many trains had already transported their heavy weapons back to Poland. Planes. Now that the Ukrainian army has taken over part of Galicia's security, I believe their remaining handover work will be completed soon. Admiral Courtois remembered the telegram from Bucharest and told the staff, then we can wait until they are handed over before starting the operation. Let all troops be calm. Okay, I'll give orders to the divisions. The staff member left immediately after answering, leaving Admiral Courtois alone to think quietly. Stop, what are you doing? On the border of Chernovtsi, the Ukrainian army soldiers who had just taken over the defense from the German army and had not had time to be happy faced disputes with Romania. We have lost a soldier. According to the information, he was kidnapped by your people. Now we need to go in and search. Looking at the Ukrainian soldiers at the border post, the Romanian officer who led the team gave reason that he didn't believe. It's impossible. When have we captured your people? We have to give evidence. When we speak. After hearing the unreasonable request of Romania, the Ukrainian officer led by the post immediately denied it righteously. Now we need to go in and search. If you resist with a guilty conscience, it means that what I said is the truth. This will be an act of provoking war. I hope you can know the consequences. After the Romanian leading officer said something unquestionable to the Ukrainian officer at the post, he immediately made a gesture to let his subordinates forcibly enter the post to search. In the face of the extremely unreasonable Romanians, the small officer of the post tried his best to suppress his inner anger. He was pushed aside by Romania semi-passively and at the same time restrained the impulsive emotions of his subordinates, keeping him so restrained, except that the Romanians had a battalion and only a platoon of their own. The words of provoking the war deterred him. A Ukrainian officer who had only been a squad leader in the Austro-Hungarian army before, of course, knew the consequences of provoking a war. This was not something his small shoulder could bear. Of course, in his heart, he wanted to see the expressions that Romania couldn't find any evidence and could only leave in disappointment. Because he knew very well that there could be no lost Romanian soldiers in this post. With the patience of Ukrainian officers, the Romanian soldiers who were rummaging through the cabinets moved quickly. After a while, an angry Romanian officer came out with a blood-stained Romanian uniform. Before the Ukrainian officer at the post understood what was going on, the Romanian officer with the blood-stained uniform walked up to him and said righteously, "This is the evidence that you kidnapped our people." Looking at the evidence that he had never seen before, the Ukrainian officer immediately understood. These Romanians are not looking for evidence, but to find fault. He immediately retorted, "You can also call it evidence. It's ridiculous. You are framing it." Indeed, what the Ukrainian officer said is the real truth, and a blood-stained uniform cannot be relied upon. But whoever asked them to do it on purpose, the Romanian officers who led the team would not speak according to the facts. Now we have every reason to believe that Ukrainian troops did this. Now we will detain you until the truth is revealed. You dare? The Ukrainian officer's words immediately filled the tension between the two sides, with both sides raising their weapons and aiming at each other. A conflict seemed inevitable. In this tense confrontation, the performance of the two armies also appeared to be different. The Romanian army seemed to be prepared for this, and the soldiers looked normal, as if they could shoot and kill these Ukrainian troops with just one order. The unprepared Ukrainian army has all kinds of expressions, some angry, some dismissive, and some pale and shivering. Point as their commander, the Ukrainian post officer is now quite troubled. The consequences of provoking a war are not something he can bear, and the gap between the two sides is too great. If there is a conflict, he and others will only suffer. However, it is intolerable for him to be detained by the Romanian obediently. The dilemma made him not know what to do. The tangled expression of the Ukrainian officer completely fell into the eyes of the Romanian officer who led the team. I saw him smiling and saying to him, "If you don't know what to do with this matter, it's best to hand it over to your superiors. And during the process, each of you can carry your own finances with you. In addition, we can also follow Romanian regulations. The standard of treatment and compensation will be given to you during this period." The words of the Romanian officer made the Ukrainian post officer a little moved, because he knew that this was a step for him and his subordinates. If there was a conflict, he would not have a good result, and if he refused to continue armed conflict, it would be inevitable. Let me think again. The words of the Ukrainian officer made the Romanian commander who led the team laughed, and he knew it had happened. Sure enough, within a few minutes, the post officer called a soldier behind him and instructed him to report the news to the rear, while he took the others and stayed here temporarily to wait for the result. What the Ukrainian post officer did not know was that when they were surrounded, a body in a Romanian military uniform was quietly brought to the stables and buried without them noticing. And what happened next was not something he could handle. When the result of the conflict was reported to the headquarters of the 2nd Ukrainian Army Corps in Lviv, Lieutenant General Rumidiko, the regiment commander who had just taken over the defense from the Germans and was not happy for a long time, scolded furiously. "Damn it, these Romanians are so deceiving." Lieutenant General Rumidiko was born in Galicia and was an officer in the Austro-Hungarian army. After the establishment of the Ukrainian People's Government, it was one of the 3 division commanders transferred from Austria-Hungary to Ukraine. And this time, the task of leading the team to accept the German defenses to be completed by him. Beside him, Major General Novichev, who had been his chief of staff since the days of the Austro-Hungarian army, couldn't help asking, "Then what should we do? It seems that the Romanians will not stop." Nomichev's words made Lieutenant General Rumidiko feel the difficulty of this matter. "It's more dangerous than Kiev. If I knew I should not lead the team over, let those bastards come and have a taste." Lieutenant General Rumidiko, who was suffering from a headache, couldn't help but complain, while Nomichev, who listened to his complaints, stayed quietly aside, waiting for the regiment commander's disposal plan. After Rumidiko complained, he still needed to find a way. Who made him the commander? He walked to the map, looked at the location of the conflict and thought, it is impossible to fight, let alone the Romanian army, that can compete with the German army, and none of the divisions under its own can succeed. How can you fight with others when you recruited an army that has not been trained for a while? And whether in terms of equipment or training, the Romanians have to crush themselves. Hands-on is completely out of the question. And the focus of their attention at the moment is the Soviet element in eastern Ukraine. These Soviet militants with various names seem to be from Moscow. Moreover, what he has done in Russia at present has scared the Ukrainian parliament master, so these red element must be severely suppressed. Lieutenant General Rumidiko, whose head was aching, still couldn't come up with a solution, so he sighed and said to his chief of staff, "Let's report it to Kiev and let those senior government officials decide what to do." Rumidiko's words made Nomichev say, "You also know the current situation in Kiev. This matter can't be discussed in a short time. Is it really good to leave it to them? What can I do? It's a diplomatic matter, not to whom." Rumidiko's explanation made Nomichev know what to do, so he could only answer, "Okay, let the gentlemen in Kiev handle this troublesome matter. I just don't know. Do these gentlemen have any free time?" They were right, and the telegrams from Lviv's 2nd Corps made things worse in Kiev. Chapter 382 Whale Swallow 4. This is a shameless provocation against us in Ukraine, and we need to fight back vigorously. In the Ukrainian parliament, an indignant looking member of the parliament is making a righteous statement. A cooperating voice sounded. How do we need to respond to Romania's provocation? The congressman replied immediately, of course we will first eliminate those Bolsheviks who are entrenched in the Donetsk and Kharkov regions, and then have a showdown with the Romanians. But we will destroy these Bolsheviks according to our strength. The Croats have some difficulties. I think we can invite the Russian army, which has a deep hatred against them, to help us. The closest to us is the South Russian volunteer army of General Denikin in Tsaritsyn. I believe that General Denikin will accept our request. You are betraying Ukraine. You betrayed Ukraine. The congressman's words immediately attracted scolding from others. They all knew what Denikin's South Russian volunteer army was about, and they also understood the thoughts of General Denikin. For the fertile Ukrainian region, the General Denikin has always had ambitions to bring it into his sphere of influence. And this congressman's proposal is completely paving the way for it, which is an unacceptable result. In fact, not only does Denikin have ambitions to infect Ukraine, but Moscow's Red Element are already armed in eastern Ukraine. These Red Element, in the name of making the nation independent, have attracted a lot of mud-legged and intellectuals who do not know the truth, and caused the Ukrainian government to have a headache. As a last resort, the government can only send troops to hold back its development. As for the elimination of these militants, this also has a lot to do with the majority of the local Russians. It's like pulling a hair and moving the whole body, giving them a headache. The congressman, who was scolded by everyone, said loudly, this is the best way, or you can come up with a solution to the problem. His words made the scolding gradually quieter when a congressman suggested, why don't we discuss with Romania and see their conditions? This proposal was immediately refuted. These Romanian are not good things, and it is obvious to find fault. And in our East Moldavia, those Romanian people are constantly clamoring to merge with Romania. You to comply with their request. After seeing that his proposal was rejected, the congressman who proposed to negotiate said angrily, then what do you say? I think it can be mobilized across the country, so that 1 million troops can be recruited. Wouldn't our problem be solved in this way? As soon as the congressman's words came out, he drew a violent response. Where do we get weapons and officers to equip the millions of troops from these signs? It sounds nice. Don't know how much it costs. What kind of proposal is this? All of our property is sold, and it is not enough to recruit the cost. I think you're here to find fault. This proposal to recruit millions of troops has attracted a huge wave of opposition. There are military considerations, economic considerations, and vexatious ones. Either way, it makes this proposal unacceptable. Facing the anger of almost all the members, the member who just said this proposal immediately withered, and he could only bear everything in front of him silently. Seeing that this proposal was pushed back, the members sitting here calmed down their hearts for serving the country and the people. Then they came up with various plans, and had a fierce dispute. It seems that facing Romania's problems, this will require another confrontation. The quarrel in the parliament also spread to the government, and Morakov, who is currently serving as the prime minister, has long been prepared for this. In fact, the current Ukrainian government is also divided into several factions, led by him, mainly from Odessa, Nikolaev, Vinnytsia and other western Ukraine regions. Headed by President Kalbachev, the faction comes from northern Ukraine such as Chernihiv, Kyiv, and Rovro. Headed by the head of the parliament, Mikhail, from Kherson, Zaporozhye, Dnipropetrovsk and other cities, and the lower Dnieper region is another faction. Of course, it is only the most powerful faction among the many political forces in Ukraine at present. In fact, at present, there are more than 140 registered political organizations in Ukraine, and more than 200 seats in the parliament belong to more than 30 political forces. And all this is the result of its late national awakening and the Russian government's efforts to suppress Ukraine's political forces. Moreover, after Germany and Austria formed their new government in Ukraine, too little support was also one of the reasons the hundreds of political forces that had sprung up like mushrooms have their own demands. Coupled with the lack of a political leader who can convince everyone, this is also the main reason why the current bills and proposals are difficult to produce. What did they reply? Prime Minister Morakov, who knew about Ukraine's domestic political disputes, asked his own finance minister, Dikol, The banker turned Jekyll has an important position in his faction, which is why Morakov asked him to negotiate with the president and the head of parliament. Yes, at present the Ukrainian government cannot take into account the disputes in Romania, but Morakov, who is based in western Ukraine, has no way to escape. Afraid that his inaction will cause the faction to be divided, he can only discuss with the president and the head of parliament. It's just that with Morakov's understanding of the two, it would be very difficult for him to pass the test without losing a profit this time, and Jekyll's words really verified his guess this time. I discussed with them, and the situation is not optimistic. Prime Minister Morakov only understood why he said this in the account of Finance Minister Jekyll. First, President Gorbachev wants his faction to get the post of Minister of Education. Yes, in terms of government departments, the Ministry of Education does not have great power, but it has a lot of money. In the northern region, which is supported by the president, its economy is not as high as that of the regions to which the other two factions belong. It is not difficult to see its intention point. If the president's request is still considered, then the request of Parliament Speaker Macron is a bit out of line. He wants the position of Interior Minister and hopes to get the current Minister of the Interior Ramakachi together with Morakov. This requirement makes Morakov feel thorny. The reason is simple. Interior Secretary Ramakachi has his own faction. Moreover, the Ukraine party to which it belongs is still powerful among many Ukrainian factions. In addition, there are more than a dozen factions that are close to him, which is why he can sit in the position of real power as Minister of the Interior. And now Macron has taken a fancy to this key position, and it is obvious that he intends to join forces with Morakov, who is begging him to get Ramakachi, which makes Morakov feel that he is being used. After listening to Jekyll's remarks, Morakov thought for a long time before he said, "It seems that I can only talk to them. I hope they can lower their requirements, otherwise I can't explain it to others." For Prime Minister Morakov's words. Finance Minister Jekyll certainly knows why. All aspects of government duties have already been taken into account. And following the request of the president and the head of parliament, the removal of two ministerial positions whose powers are not enough will cause internal turmoil and make the already unstable regime even more shaky. So in the face of the prime minister's words, Jekyll nodded and replied, "Then only I will try it again. Thanks a lot. When the Ukrainian government cannot negotiate a charter for the dispute with Romania, General Cortois, who is based in northern Moldavia, will not wait. In fact, Romania only needs an excuse, and the chaotic political situation in Ukraine has made this excuse ferment." On the third day of the disappearance of the soldiers, His Excellency the General issued an order asking the Moldavian army to punish the Ukrainian army for unreasonably provoking trouble. As the order was issued, more than 200,000 battle-hardened Romanian soldiers immediately rushed to various regions of western Ukraine, and the short-lived Rau War began. Chapter 383 Whale Swallow 5. In the face of the invasion of the Romanian army, the Second Corps, which had just taken over the western Ukraine, was defeated one after another. To say that he was defeated is a compliment to him, and to be fair, it should be a one-shot defeat. In the face of the Romanian Bureau army, which was crushed by firepower and elite level, the Ukrainian soldiers were completely powerless to fight back. Lieutenant General Rumidiko, the commander of his army, could only ask Kiev for help when he saw the performance of his subordinates. Because no matter how many resistance plans he has, the soldiers need to implement it, and it is difficult for his soldiers to complete his vision at present. In the face of Lieutenant General Rumidko's request for help, there was another dispute within the Ukrainian government. However, the dispute this time is not about whether to fight, but about how to fight, how much to fight, and when to negotiate. Among them, Prime Minister Morakov's faction, which is closest to Romania, is most interested in the proposal. They demanded to recruit 250,000 Ukrainian troops, and then assemble the existing troops to fight with Romania in an effort to drive Romania out of Ukraine. At the same time, negotiate with it, and if necessary, can give up the East Moldavia region. The faction of President Gorbachev believed that the recruitment of soldiers was too many, and the Ukrainian government could not afford it, and mobilized a maximum of 150,000 soldiers. As for the invasion of the Romanians, it is completely possible to let the army defend various key areas, and then call on everyone to resist the invasion of Romania, dragging the Romanians into the ocean of popular resistance. On the other hand, Macron, the head of the parliament, believes that there are too few soldiers to be recruited. When the country is in danger, at least 400,000 people need to be recruited. At the same time, the Romanian army can be put into the territory of Ukraine, and its supply lines can be lengthened. Then they gathered their superior forces to fight against them, and drove them back to Romania in one go. In addition to the proposals of the three parties, other parties have also proposed their own plans. It's incredible, it's simply breathtaking. One of them required the recruitment of 800,000 troops, and then used materials to attract Denikin to help. Then he attacked Romania in one go, forcing it to open up the territory of West Moldavia and let everyone know the strength of Ukraine. These ideas came up with a slap of the head, without taking into account whether Ukraine has the ability to guarantee the amount of materials for so many troops. And in his eyes, the army does not need training. As long as there is patriotic enthusiasm, it can defeat a strong enemy. While Ukraine was arguing about this, a part of the army led by General Courtois, led by Lieutenant General Farit, had already invaded Chisinau, an important city in the West Moldavia region. Now they have started a lively entrance ceremony to announce that the city, which has been occupied by Russia for decades, is back in the arms of Romania. On Mossy Street, the main road of Chisinau, enthusiastic citizens were holding flowers to warmly welcome the Romanian soldiers who entered the city. And as their commander-in-chief, Lieutenant General Farit rarely rode a horse and walked in front of them. The warm welcome of the people along the way, they gave heartfelt cheers to the famous general. And Lieutenant General Farit also waved to them frequently, and the result was that the cheers became more resounding. The city entry ceremony lasted for a whole morning, and it was not announced until noon. And Lieutenant General Farit immediately summoned local influential people after the city entry ceremony. The Kingdom of Romania needs these people to stabilize the local situation. In fact, without him calling, these people have been waiting for a long time. These people are better informed than others, and they all know the current strength of the Romanian kingdom, and the defeat of the Allied powers has been determined. Now who doesn't want to dedicate their loyalty to Bucharest? Can they count on Kiev, the regime supported by Germany and Austria? It is estimated that these people in Kiev will not be able to protect themselves at that time. So after Lieutenant General Farit's order to summon them came, one by one immediately appeared in front of him. Lieutenant General Farit looked at these local prominent figures who appeared in front of him and said, "I know that you are all longing for Romania, and you have made contributions. The kingdom will not forget everyone who has made contributions. Today, the kingdom is prosperous under the leadership of His Majesty, and you are also credited with it. So this time, I hope you can help the government to maintain local stability, so that everyone can feel the kingdom's love for its people." I believe you have no opinion on this. In the face of Lieutenant General Farit's words, everyone present said, "It is my honor to be able to contribute to the kingdom." In fact, Lieutenant General Farit had already known about these people in front of him through the intelligence department. These people are all grass-like existences, and whoever is strong depends on whomever. Before, these people ignored the olive branch extended by Romania, but after Russia withdrew from the war, their attitude changed greatly and became enthusiastic. And after Romania declared war, it immediately changed back. When Germany's defeat was decided, these same people immediately became kneeling and licking, each claiming that East Moldavia was an inseparable part of Romania, and the speed with which their attitudes changed was astonishing. In fact, Lieutenant General Farit is disgusting with the behavior of these people, but now in order to ensure the stability and prosperity of the local area, we can only appease these people first. However, according to the gossip I got, the government intends to re-support a group of people loyal to Romania after capturing the area, and these people will be slowly replaced. But now Farit can still use them, and it depends on the performance of these people on the tasks given to them next, and decides who can stay and observe for a period of time. Only thinking of this, Farit said to a pale-haired old man in the lead, "Your Excellency Q Knights, as the largest grain merchant in the region, I think it is necessary to allow everyone to eat, and let them feel the kingdom is different from the previous Russian government. What do you think of this proposal? Facing the words of Lieutenant General Friet, the grain merchant immediately replied, very good proposal. This proposal is simply the gospel of all people, and they will definitely feel the kindness of the kingdom. Then how about leaving this to you? It is my pleasure. General. Lieutenant General Friet continued to name several people. They were all local businesses that were related to people's livelihood, and all of them responded to Friet's request without compromise. On the contrary, this surprised the Lieutenant General, who planned to be rejected by others, and it seems that none of these people are stupid. After dealing with local security matters, Lieutenant General Friet left a brigade to maintain law and order. Next, he has to rush to Odessa with the army. There are no Romanian people with an advantage here, and he doesn't know whether the Ukrainian army will definitely fight him here. However, according to the information sent by Admiral Courtois, the combat effectiveness of these Ukrainian troops is worrying, and they are not afraid of a fight. Chapter 384 Whale Swallow 6. While the Romanian army was driving horses on Ukrainian soil, news of Carol's abdication came from within the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Despite the Habsburgs' efforts to retain their position, the Austrian and Hungarian parliaments decided to oust them. Moreover, the property of the Habsburg family was also reverted to the government. The decision of the Austrian and Hungarian governments has caused the Habsburg family, who have dominated Europe for nearly 1,000 years, to fall to the bottom of the valley, and their lives are now a problem. But when Edel got the news, he was called by his wife Sophie Mary immediately. It seems that she, who was born in the Habsburg family, is also very concerned about the family's troubles. As soon as Edel entered the room, she saw his wife Sophie Mary holding a secondary frame, looking at the photos inside, stroking it gently, and shedding tears seeing his wife's actions. Edel hurried forward to comfort him. Mary, what's wrong with you? Don't be too sad. Facing Edel's consolation, Queen Mary still looked at the photo in the frame and said, this is the only family photo I have, but it's a pity that people are now different things. Edel followed his wife's gaze. This is a photo of a family of 5. His father-in-law, Archduke Otto Franz, and his wife, Princess Josepha of Saxony, stood behind. The first 3 children who smiled innocently were his wife Princess Sophie Mary, Charles I, and Grand Duke Eugen. However, his father-in-law, Archduke Otto Franz, passed away in 1913. The cause of his death was a disease caused by lingering in the fireworks venue. As for the mother-in-law, Princess Josepha, who died earlier, in 1903, she died of illness. After seeing Edel coming, Queen Mary turned to him. Edel, I didn't ask about politics before. This time I beg you. Can you let the Habsburg family come to our side for a while? The family has made so many contributions to them. More than half of Vienna's we built all the concert halls. Now they are being kicked out of the house. These people are going too far. Looking at his wife's red eyes from tears, Edel refused to say anything, so he could only speak earnestly. Mary, you know that the Habsburg family has too many people, and their goals are too big. If you come to Romania, everyone will criticize it, which is not good for us and them. Edel's explanation did not dissuade his wife. She continued unwillingly, then let Karl and Eugen come over. They are my younger brothers, and I can't bear to let them suffer like this. Since my father passed away afterwards, I haven't seen them for too long. Will Edel help me make this wish come true? Okay, I'll send someone a telegram. In the face of a begging wife, Edel couldn't refuse. After all, she is a wife who has been with her for many years, who can be completely free from emotions. Although this is a thankless task for Romania, it does not hurt to make a small mistake for his wife. Mary, I'll send them a telegram this time. But if they don't want to come, there's nothing they can do. Facing her husband's words, Queen Mary, who was in a much better mood, calmed down and said, I know. If they don't want to come, I won't force it. After all, the descendants of the Habsburgs need to face their own choices. Seeing his wife in a better mood, Edel stepped forward and put his arms around her and said, don't worry, I will take care of your people's lives, and I won't let them suffer from hunger and severe cold. whether they recognize it or not. Help from the Hohenzollern family point. Hearing Edel's words, Queen Mary felt the temperature of her husband's chest and said with satisfaction, "Edel, you are so kind to me." Point Mary, who made you my wife. After appeasing his wife Mary, the telegram that Romania invited Karl and Eugen to visit Bucharest was sent to Geneva, Switzerland, where the Habsburg family temporarily settled. Point. When this telegram was put into the hands of Carol and others, many members of the Habsburg family showed envious eyes. Before, these people never thought about life, because the Habsburg family could let them not worry about life. But in just a few days, after being expelled from Austria, these people who did not know the suffering of the people tasted it, so they were very fond of their previous life. But it is a pity that in this era of war and chaos, no one is willing to help them live a happy life before. Point. And when Romania sent a letter inviting the Karl and Eugens to go to Bresciano to reunite with their sister Sophie Mary, no one was jealous. Unfortunately, they were not included in the invitation, and there were private complaints about this. He had also hugged Queen Mary before, that she and Mary were good sisters when they were children, etc. But he didn't dare to spread them to the ears of the parties. As for the invited Karl and Eugen, there was not much of a heartbeat for this telegram from Romania. Carol is currently preparing to return to Austria-Hungary. Even if the Habsburg family is expelled, no one can underestimate his local influence, and Carol obviously intends to use it to prepare for his return. Point. If he or his family went to Romania, the news would make an already difficult task even more difficult. Something, he said, could not be allowed. So he can only say sorry for his sister's helping hand, and his wife Queen Zita also supports him in this decision. In fact, in his heart, he is the Emperor of Austria-Hungary, and even if it is bad, he cannot fall to the point of relying on Romania, which is still at war. This is also one of the few motivations in his heart to support him to continue. Point. The Grand Duke Eugen's family also rejected the help extended by his sister. For the same reason, he couldn't stand the result of the Habsburg falling, so helping his brother to return to Austria-Hungary was the most concerned thing. If he made it difficult for his brother to return because of himself, he would not accept it. So in the end, Romania's hand of friendship did not receive the two families, which made Queen Mary, who was looking forward to it, sad again. And Edel saw his wife's sadness, and deliberately set aside a day to accompany his wife. For the decision that the brothers-in-law were unwilling to come to Romania, Edel was still somewhat prepared. Because if the Habsburg family came to Romania, its influence in the original territory of Austria-Hungary would be a major blow. This is also why Edel invited Carol and Eugen separately, because they clearly realized that coming to Romania is not a good choice. As for other members of the Habsburg family, if they invited them, it is difficult to say. Edel's decision to accompany his wife for a good day was not completed in the end. On the afternoon of the same day, the main force of the Moldavian army led by Admiral Courtois and the Ukrainian army fought a battle in Kovrov, 30 kilometers southeast of Lviv. As a qualified monarch, Edel certainly needs to go to the staff to find out the situation. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 385 Whale Swallow 7. A Romanian officer waved at the soldiers behind him and shouted attack. After seeing the Romanians attacking, the Ukrainian officer who fought off a wave of attack shouted to the soldiers behind him with smoke-colored faces, "Fight back, repel these Romanian robbers." On the battlefield of Hovrov, soldiers from both sides of Rau were fighting fiercely. Ta-ta-ta boom boom boom. The violent sound of gunfire injected the music of death for the soldiers of the two sides who were desperately fighting, making them more involved in the battle. And the corpses that fell down because of the battle became the best sacrifices for the god of death. In the rear of the battlefield, as the commander who initiated the campaign, General Courtois was closely watching the trend of the battle. After observing the situation, Admiral Courtois put down his telescope and immediately instructed the communication staff beside him, strengthen the left wing artillery to the middle and give priority to the breakthrough in the middle. In addition, 2 divisions will be drawn from the reserve to enhance the attack strength of the middle. I will see progress tomorrow. Point. After recording the admiral's order, the staff officer replied immediately, yes, I'll give the order right away. Point. The battle with the Ukrainian army near Volov was the result of joint deliberations between General Kortois and the general staff. The reason is entirely to destroy the will of the Ukrainian army to resist, to make the Ukrainian government realize that fighting against the powerful Romanian army is not beneficial to it. Point. In order to lure the Ukrainian government to transfer its troops to Volov, he has been forbearing and cautiously attacking the Ukrainian Second Army to make them rush to the critical situation of the battle, but also make them feel that they can resist. This is completely a technical job. This is also why the Romanian army has been at war for more than half a month and still has not occupied Wolof. Point. However, judging from the current war situation, Ukraine knows that the move is completely in line with General Kortois's thinking. Point. In fact, after Romania declared war, an agreement was quickly reached after a brief dispute within the Ukrainian government. In just 1 week, they recruited 10,000 soldiers and formed 15 Ukrainian divisions. And these Ukrainian soldiers, inspired by patriotic enthusiasm, were sent to Lviv and Odessa with little training. Of course, Admiral Kortois was dispatched to the main force of 170,000 people, and the remaining 80,000 people were sent to Odessa, except for the 10,000 people who were left to strengthen the garrison of Kyiv. Point. After the recruits arrived in Lviv, General Kortois immediately launched an onslaught. Take Ivano-Fransk, Karashansky one after another, and force them directly to the vicinity of Lviv. Point. And Lieutenant General Rumidko, who had just been promoted to the Ukrainian First Army, was forced to have no way out. Point. There is only one battle with the Romanian army near Wolof, in an attempt to take advantage of the terrain and internal combat, to block the Romanian army. Therefore, on Kovrov, the main point of the eastern front of Wolof, the two sides set up a battle. Point. From the current point of view, despite the heavy casualties, the Ukrainian army has blocked the Romanian offensive. Point. However, Admiral Kortois will not let them do so. According to the situation on the battlefield, he intends to let these Ukrainians taste the real strength of Romania. Let them know why the Bulgarian army was beaten and called surrender, why the Austro-Hungarian army was beaten and retreated, and why it was on an equal footing with the German army. He has not yet come up with the means to deal with the Allied army. Point. In the afternoon, with the adjustments made by His Excellency the Admiral, the central offensive that hid more artillery and troops immediately showed its power. The continuous sound of artillery fire resounding through the sky carried the complaints of Ukrainian soldiers, and the continuous infantry offensive made these defending Ukrainian soldiers can only support them. Point. These completely untrained Ukrainian soldiers have been brutally killed on the battlefield, killing their little patriotic enthusiasm. The screams of the wounded comrades around them, and the explosions of artillery around them from time to time, made their fears amplify. If it wasn't for the constraints of military discipline and battlefield discipline, they would have run back to their warm homes long ago. They don't even know if they will collapse in the next attack. Point. The Ukrainian officers on the front line faced the Romanian onslaught, and could only keep sending reinforcement from the rear. As their commander, Lieutenant General Rumidko is now quite regretful. However, it is not so simple to retreat on the battlefield. When evaluating the elite level of an army, the performance of retreat has always been a very important indicator. Moreover, the current quality of the Ukrainian army is that they dare not withdraw from the battlefield, because these people will disperse halfway. Therefore, Lieutenant General Rumidko can only let them stand up to the death. Even if the casualties are serious, they cannot retreat. Point. It's just that human will still has a limit, and this limit will always come sooner or later. When the sun sets in the west, the Ukrainian soldiers defending in the middle can no longer face the fear of the battlefield. They completely ignored the officers' reprimands and threats to the gendarmerie, and got up from the trenches, and ran to the open field behind them. They are looking for a place without the smell of gunpowder to soothe the fear of war in their hearts. From a small number of deserters, they expanded the escape of the entire battalion in a short period of time. Point. This rapidly expanding phenomenon of deserters on the battlefield stunned everyone, but the attacking Romanian soldiers were ecstatic, while other Ukrainian soldiers on the battlefield felt chills. When Admiral Kortois knew about this situation, he suppressed the ecstasy in his heart and immediately ordered Immediately order the reserves to enter the battle, and the crack torn in the middle will expand to the flanks. I want to enter Wolof before sunset tomorrow. City point in the rear of the Ukrainian front. Lieutenant General Rumidko, who is in charge of the command, is another scene point. It's over. It's over. Depressed Lieutenant General Rumidko muttered, regretting that he easily fell for General Courtois. The Chief of Staff Nemitchev saw Rumidko's lifeless appearance and immediately walked up to him and shouted loudly, "Wake up, Rumidko. Now we should think of a way, retreat, or send reinforcement. Make up your mind now, before it's too late." The words of the Chief of Staff made Rumidko gradually come back to his senses. He still has 3 divisions in reserve, and now he really needs to find a way. Let the troops withdraw. Let's return to Shepatovka immediately, and rely on the Dnieper heights to defend. And immediately report to Kiev that we require reinforcement, not less than 300,000 reinforcement, otherwise I can't guarantee to stop these Romanians. But Rumidko's order was too late. With the order of General Courtois's general offensive, Romania's general offensive began, and the Ukrainian army, which had long been shaken by deserters, was defeated. However, the Romanian army, eager to win, did not let them go, and immediately pursued the defeated Ukrainian army without stopping. And these defeated Ukrainian troops were scattered without reinforcement. The open fields were full of Ukrainian troopers, which thwarted Rumidko's desire to gather them back to Shepatovka. At noon the next day, the historic Polish city of Wolof fell into the hands of the Romanians. Send a report to Bucharest immediately, and tell them that we have defeated the enemy and captured Wolof, and then we will sweep the nearby cities, and bring them into the arms of the Kingdom of Romania. When Admiral Courtois' good news reached Bucharest, Admiral Pretian, who received the telegram, said to Eda, who had been waiting for the news, "Your Majesty, we have eliminated the established resistance in Ukraine. And we have taken down Lviv city. Next, we have to look at Lieutenant General Ferit." Facing the words of Admiral Pretian, Eda replied with satisfaction, "Admiral Courtois has done a good job. I believe that Lieutenant General Freer will not let us down." While Edel was talking, there was a sudden noise from the door, and someone said loudly, "Odessa was taken by Lieutenant General Ferit, and the enemy was beaten to pieces. Now those Ukrainians know how good we are." The 2 people in the room looked at each other and smiled when they heard the words outside. Now they can safely wait for the Ukrainian government to act next. Whether it is war or peace, Romania has the confidence to take over. Chapter 386 Ninth Whale Swallow 8. When both the northern and southern armies were routed by Romania, allowing it to occupy Lviv and Odessa, there was a panic within Ukraine. After more than 300,000 troops were defeated by Romania and only 100,000 people fled back, this result made the government gentlemen feel panic. Will this guy Rumidko fight? The number of people is so tragic, and he lost Wolof. Such a general should be sent to a military court. The speaker's own opinion of a member of parliament who speaks loudly. I think the current government needs to call up another 500,000 troops to let Romania know that our Ukraine is not so easy to mess with. This is yet another MP expressing his opinion. That's nice to say. I'll recruit another 500,000 troops. Will you pay for it? A congressman voiced his disapproval. After seeing everyone's eyes on him, he expressed his opinion. "In my opinion, this is a reason why the army has not been trained, and our weapons and equipment are not enough to recruit 500,000 people." It seems that this is the man who understands, and his words have aroused the interest of others. "Then what do you say?" the congressman said with confidence. "If you want me to say, you need to find a well-trained army, and then combine with the soldiers we recruited to resist the attack of these Romanians. At present General Denikin in Serizon is the best. Good choice. His South Russian volunteer army has 200,000 people. Enough for us." The congressman's suggestion immediately aroused a violent response, and a young congressman next to him pointed at him and scolded, "Okay, you thief, you are also helping Denikin's idea of Ukraine. Say, what exactly did he give? What a benefit to you?" The congressman who was scolded by his nose immediately retorted, "Don't talk nonsense. I'm doing this for Ukraine's interests today. I will kill you, a traitor, for Ukraine." After speaking, the young congressman jumped up, and the others next to him saw the physical conflict between the two and immediately stepped forward to pull them away. And the 3 people, President Kalbachev, Prime Minister Morokov, and Parliament Speaker Macron, who have witnessed all this with their own eyes, have become accustomed to this. The fight in Parliament is not news now. It will be news if there is no fight someday. These parliamentarians who have suddenly gained high positions to represent local interests have not yet learned that politics is the art of compromise. It's just that in the face of the persecuted Romanian army, the three of them couldn't wait for the parliament to continue quarreling for a result point as the prime minister who suffered the most losses in the battle against Romania, Morakov, took the lead and said, "Now that the Romanian army has occupied western Ukraine, come to us. Do you two have any good solutions?" In the face of Prime Minister Morakov's inquiry, the Speaker of Parliament Macron saw that President Gorbachev did not speak, so he had to speak. "Can you tell us how much money and supplies the government has left?" Instead of giving advice first, Parliament Speaker Macron was concerned about the government's wealth point. Faced with the question from the Speaker of Parliament Macron, Prime Minister Morakov, who is in charge of government work, replied with a wry smile, "Now the government's material warehouse is ready to run mice. The 230,000 soldiers recruited for the war have already taken away our few supplies. I have also asked Lieutenant General Nomitov, the chief of the general staff, and he said that the most effective way at present is to have Marshal Mackensen, who has retired to Poland, be invited back. Such an important matter, of course, requires the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will do it." Point after Prime Minister Morakov finished speaking, he and the Speaker of Parliament turned their heads to the pot-bellied President Gorbachev. Facing the questioning gazes of the two, President Gorbachev shook his huge head. Shiny, sleek, and meticulously groomed hair. Even the flies can't stand. I saw him with a wry smile and said, "I have tried Lieutenant General Nomitov's suggestion a long time ago. If it is so good, please do it." Marshal Mackensen said that the German army is currently in short supply. "As long as we can come up with these," he led the army, "to help us resist the Romanian offensive." After speaking, President Gorbachev took out a piece of paper from his pocket, which seemed to be the request of Marshal Mackensen. For Marshal Mackensen's record, neither of them need to comment too much. So after seeing this small note, the two of them put their heads together. "I intend to see what the conditions are that make President Gorbachev smile bitterly." There are not many words on the small note paper in this chapter, and there are only a few items on it. But when the two of them saw it clearly, they both took a deep breath. It was written on it that 850,000 tons of wheat, 1.1 million tons of corn, 450,000 tons of oats, and 300,000 tons of potatoes. These are all required grains, but 2.7 million tons of grain is also an incredible figure for Ukraine, which is itself a grain producing area. You must know that Russia exported the highest year in 1909 and only exported 12 million tons of grain, of which corn exports accounted for the majority. And after years of war, there is currently not enough food in Russia to eat. Although Ukraine is a grain producing area with fertile black soil, they have only been independent for nearly a year. Moreover, Germany has already looted food once before. If it hadn't been for a good harvest this year, Ukraine might have suffered a famine. Where would it be able to provide so much food? And this was only the cost of inviting the German troops to send troops. If they really invite these people in, they must have material security. Even if they don't need ammunition, people will need a lot of food to eat. Horses in the eyes of the three, this list was no different from rejection. In fact, Marshal Mackensen did intend to reject it. However, considering the current domestic famine and Ukraine is a grain producing area, such a list of troops was temporarily tinkered with. Of course, if the Ukrainian government has actually collected the materials for this list, then it will not matter if he makes a trip. Maybe it can be searched again from Ukraine, who makes Germany have to catch and eat mice at present. At present, it seems that the way to find Germany for help is broken. As for the only reinforcement they can find, only Denikin in Tsaritsyn is left. However, the three of them fully understand Denikin's thoughts. Moreover, they all knew that they could not lead wolves into the house until the moment of life and death. In the end, it was President Gorbachev who tried to say, "How about we propose peace talks to Romania? I think I can try it." President Gorbachev's remarks immediately drew a response from Parliament Speaker Macron. and after speaking, the Speaker of Parliament Mikhail and President Gorbachev looked at Prime Minister Morakov together, and the intention was obvious. Prime Minister Morakov, who was stared at by the two, knew that they were expressing their position more than himself, but the current bad war situation made him completely lose his temper, so he had to say, "I agree, but you have to think carefully. Eastern Moldova region will definitely not survive. How bad the situation on the battlefield is. There is no way out. I agree. As the three reached an agreement, they then rallied to divide other parties, and finally got the parliament to agree to the request for peace talks. In fact, these lawmakers are well aware that this conflict in Ukraine will end in a fiasco, and there will be a price to pay. Therefore, water and water push boats basically voted in favor, with the exception of a few stunned youths who were clamoring to fight Romania to the death, and opposed by members of parliament with ulterior motives. The vote for this bill was considered to be very high. When the request for Ukrainian peace talks was placed on Eda's table, in front of him were all the important ministers with beaming faces. Isn't this what every country likes to do when it comes to collecting benefits from other countries? Eda glanced at the rejoicing ministers in front of him, and he said to Prime Minister Brezhnev in front of him, "Drag these Ukrainians for 3 days and let them taste the weight." Okay, Your Majesty. After receiving a reply from the Prime Minister, Eda said to Admiral Pilishin on the side, "Send a report to Kortois and Falit immediately, so that they must complete the occupation of all points in the plan within 3 days." Understood. I'll send the report right away. After Admiral Pilishin finished speaking, he immediately strode out of the conference room. After seeing Pilishin leave, Eda asked the remaining high-ranking officials, "Let's discuss what conditions are suitable for mentioning to the Ukrainian government." When the Romanian government dragged the Ukrainian peace talks for 3 days, the Romanian army in Ukraine launched a final frantic attack. Nikolaev, Vinnytsia, Uman, Khmelnytsky and other cities have fallen into its hands, which once made the Ukrainian government think that Romania has no sincerity in peace talks. However, 3 days later, the telegram that Romania agreed to the peace talks was sent to Kyiv. After Ukraine saw that Romania agreed to the peace talks, there was another wave of fierce quarrels over the candidates for the peace talks. When will these Ukrainians mature? Chapter 387 The Treaty of Odessa. 1. Romania and Ukraine are very sincere about the peace talks, so they quickly decided on a place to negotiate. In Odessa, Ukraine's largest port city. The Romanian representative was led by Prime Minister Brezhnev. Of course, Foreign Minister Barnosk would not miss it. In addition, there were also personnel from the departments of Industry, Commerce, and Finance. The Ukrainian delegation was led by Prime Minister Morakov and included Foreign Minister Tolskov, Finance Minister Dekol, and Chief of General Staff Lieutenant General Nomitov. Almost half of them moved from Ukraine. A senior government official can see that this time the peace talks with Ukraine are very important. After the delegations from both sides had arrived, they came to the city hall in Odessa, where the peace talks took place. The Ukrainian group looked at the Odessa City Hall, which was supposed to be guarded by their own guards, but was now guarded by Romanian soldiers. The group felt uncomfortable. The Romanian delegation who walked into the city hall with them was completely different. They were all indifferent to them, and only showed a slight smile when they shook hands. There is a long table covered with white cloth. Dozens of stools and chairs are placed on both sides, and there are also cement-colored corners in the corners. This non-dignified or even crude parliamentary hall was the place where they negotiated. After the two parties were seated, Romanian Foreign Minister Barnosk took the lead and said, "There is not enough time and the place is relatively simple, so don't take offense." In the face of the speech of the Romanian Foreign Minister's deputy, Morakov, the Prime Minister of Ukraine, bluntly pointed out, "Your Excellency, your words are unfair. Odessa is our inherent territory, and we have not signed any. The treaty has given up the sovereignty of this territory. So to be precise, it should be that there is not enough time and the place is simple." Welcome back to Odessa. Romanian negotiators were a little surprised by Prime Minister Morakov's sensitivity to diplomatic vocabulary. You must know that there are not many heads of government who understand diplomacy, but the Ukrainian government has only been established for a year, and it is not easy for Prime Minister Morakov to find out the doorway. The fact that the official foreign minister of the Ukrainian government has not responded to this shows that he has no sensitivity to it at all. Seeing Prime Minister Morakov pointing out his mistake, Barnosk said casually, "I'm sorry, I didn't pay attention. I hope your excellency the foreign secretary will pay attention." In the face of Barnosk's indifferent tone, Morakov could only endure it. For the bickering between the Ukrainian prime minister and the foreign minister, Prime Minister Brishanu saw it. In fact, Barnosk was wrong on purpose. This is also a small skill before the negotiation, which can help them test the level of Ukrainian negotiators. At present, it seems that the current Ukrainian Prime Minister also has a qualified diplomatic level. Then the main negotiation needs to suppress the Prime Minister. After seeing Barnosk complete the mission, Prime Minister Brishanu said, tapping on the table, "Okay, let's stop worrying about these small issues, and the peace talks can start now." Seeing that no one objected to this, he signaled that Foreign Minister Barnosk could speak to Romania's conditions. After being signaled by the Prime Minister, Barnosk took out a list that had already been drawn up and stated Romania's conditions. "Everyone, the following are our conditions for this peace negotiation. First of all, this battle was caused by the border conflict between the two sides. So in order to plan the area of the respective border lines more clearly, we propose to redefine the border lines." Faced with the first article proposed by Barnosk, Morakov immediately objected. "I object. There is no problem with the border line between our two sides. The border line divided by Russia and your country is already very reasonable, and after the Treaty of Brest, after the birth of our new government, you have no right to propose such a requirement." For Prime Minister Morakov's objection, Barnosk glanced at him and then said blankly, "The current situation in Russia is turbulent, so we must reconsider the division of the border. And the Treaty of Brest is German as it was signed with the Soviet Russian regime, but we have never recognized it." In the face of Barnosk's words, Morakov was about to refute. At this time, Prime Minister Brishanu, who was the head of the Romanian negotiating delegation, interrupted, "Your Excellency Prime Minister, let us say it first. There is plenty of time to negotiate the terms, which is basic diplomatic etiquette." In the face of Prime Minister Brishanu who spoke, Morakov held back his rebuttal words and signaled to Barnosk to continue speaking. Then he glanced at Torskov, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, who was sitting like a stake beside him, and then he took a posture of listening intently. It's just that no one knows what's on his mind. After seeing that no one was bothering him, Barnosk continued. "Second, the East Moldavia region has always been the gathering place of our Romanian people. The people living here have been oppressed in the Russian era. In order to avoid being oppressed, the local people have decided to return to the Kingdom of Romania. In the arms of the country, your government must not obstruct the demands of the people in the region. So we hope to merge with the East Moldavia region. Third, according to our investigation, this conflict was caused by your injury to our soldier Dork. Therefore, you must apologize and compensate our loss and the cost of sending troops as compensation. Compensate our killed soldiers. Dork's personal injury and family spiritual compensation total 280,000 lei. In addition, this time our troops sent a total of 2.7 billion lei. About. Barnosk said a lot with the prepared conditions, but mainly the first 3 points. As for the latter, he just talked about some scraps such as business, personal exchanges, and mutual communication. He also observed the expressions of the Ukrainian representatives as he spoke, but these people were all serious and not superfluous, but he estimated that few of them could fully understand. Finally, the issue of our withdrawal. Before getting compensation and sending troops, we have the right to station and train in the area where we are currently located. In addition, in view of the poor public security conditions in the area, we will conduct public security in the area in order to protect our own rights and interests. Patrol and arrest everyone who tries to commit a crime. Of course, according to the nationality of the victim, the trial work will be handed over to our country or your side. When Barnosk finished speaking, he took out a list and handed it to the Ukrainian representative and then said, "This is a list of the cost of sending troops. Please take a look." Chapter 388 The Treaty of Odessa, Part 2. Faced with a list of expenses given by Barnosk, Morakov signaled Lieutenant General Nomitov to check it out first. These troop costs are first checked by the Chief of Staff, which is also his specialty. The so-called cost of sending troops is actually compensation. Everyone understands this, but it is better to let the professionals squeeze the water first. However, Morakov certainly would not accept the conditions for the Romanian lion to open his mouth. Therefore, according to international practice, Romania must also know Ukraine's conditions. So he said, first, I have heard the conditions given by your country. Now let's talk about ours. As the head of the Romanian delegation, Prime Minister Bricianu signaled, Prime Minister, please speak. After seeing that the Romanian representatives were all waiting for their own Ukrainian proposal, Prime Minister Morakov took out a copy of the terms drawn up by Ukraine and began to say, according to our investigation, it is not entirely certain that this conflict is currently caused by me, the responsibility of the party, so we make a few suggestions. First, reinvestigate the cause of this conflict. If it is our responsibility, then we will compensate Dork who was killed, and the amount can be negotiated between us. Second, regarding the East Moldavia region, we can hold a referendum according to the wishes of the people, but it requires third-party supervision. Both of us must not induce or threaten them. Thirdly, it is impossible for us to admit the cost of sending troops to your country. This dispute is not just me. The party has the responsibility, and so does your country, so we each bear our own military expenses. Fourth, after the peace talks are over, and the treaty is signed, your country must withdraw from the Ukrainian territory. Moreover, our country is in good order, and we do not need your country to help us maintain law and order. After listening to Morakov's view Ukrainian conditions, Barnosk, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, couldn't help laughing, and then he joked, Your Excellency Prime Minister, I think this war is like you have won. Then he said unceremoniously, this time the responsibility is entirely yours. After speaking, he took out a copy of the documents he was carrying and put it in front of Morakov. This is the testimony of your country's Ukrainian soldiers who harmed our Dork. This is enough to convince you. It's not too simple to take a confession from a Ukrainian soldier who was controlled by Romania and deliberately framed it. Morakov glanced at the slanted confession written. He shook his head and said, this is not counted. I think we must have an irrelevant third-party investigation before we can confirm it. Seeing the stubborn Ukrainian Prime Minister Bricianu stopped Barnosk, who still wanted to speak, and he directly said to him, Mr. Morakov, there will be no third party in this peace talks. I'm angry and bluntly, the current attitude of your side makes me feel that you have no sincerity in the peace talks. Since your understanding of the situation is not very clear, I suggest taking a day off before talking. The Ukrainian government is not in a hurry to reach an agreement. Maybe someone is willing to accept our terms. Whether this person is Denikin or the Soviet Russian government, it has little influence on us. I hope your excellency better consider it clearly. In the face of Prime Minister Bricianu's blatant threats, Morakov couldn't help but said angrily, you are planning to threaten us. Bricianu, who stood up and was about to leave, shook his head and replied, this is not a threat, just a piece of advice. In addition, the army is not satisfied with the terms we have drawn up. They have been shouting that they want to drink the Dnieper River, but we suppressed it. But now it seems that some of their words are still very reasonable. After speaking, Prime Minister Bricianu left with the Romanian negotiators, leaving only Morakov and his party to look at each other. They did not expect the Romanian negotiators to be so hard-hearted, negotiating and negotiating. Isn't this a slow talk? How can these Romanians be so temperamental as if they had taken gunpowder? Tulskov, the foreign minister of transparent people, since the beginning of the negotiations, said angrily, these Romanians are too barbaric. They don't understand peace talks. Morakov ignored Tulskov's words. People who don't even know basic diplomatic skills don't know why President Gorbachev values him. Taking him as a confidant is simply useless at this time. Finance Minister Jikol said worriedly, what should we do now? If these Romanians really don't talk about it, it will be a disaster for us. Facing the words of his confidant, Morakov was not easy to answer in front of everyone. However, he is also a little strange about the Romanians' behavior, but the current priority of the party is to find a way to come up with a feasible solution. Thinking of this, he resisted and asked Lieutenant General Nomitov, who was still looking at the cost list. Are these lists a big problem? Lieutenant General Nomitov, who looked a little headache, replied, it's not a big problem, but these Romanians definitely don't spend so much point. While Morakov was discussing with his delegation, Prime Minister Brezhnev, who walked out of the municipal building, was also communicating with Barnosk. These Ukrainians are quite unfamiliar with the rules of diplomacy. You also saw in the negotiation that a prime minister kept talking to us and other people didn't respond much at all. So for these Ukrainians who don't know much about the rules of diplomacy, there is no need to be like talk to other countries. Put pressure directly on them and let them know we are very dissatisfied. Does this really work? In the face of Prime Minister Brezhnev's words, Barnosk still has some trouble turning the corner. If you don't believe me, wait until the next negotiation point. In the face of Prime Minister Brezhnev, who smiled inscrutable, Barnosk said a question he had always wanted to ask. Prime Minister, why do we ask for such a high amount of compensation? And also ask for no compensation to be completed. We will not withdraw our troops. Such a request will not help us improve relations with Ukraine in the future. In his view, this condition is completely a copy of Prussia to France after the Franco-Prussian War. The only difference is that it is completely impossible for Ukraine to come up with such a large sum of money in a short period of time like France. But the effect is also the same, which is entirely to play a role in the rapid deterioration of the relationship between the two countries. The compensation for this is really not worth it. In the face of Barnosk's question, Prime Minister Brezhnev didn't know how to answer. In fact, he also wanted to ask Edel. Yes, this request was forced by Edel. However, he could not tell the Prime Minister that it would not be long before Soviet Russia denied the Treaty of Brest signed with Germany. Then the country of Ukraine, like an isolated little girl, was humiliated by the two big men of the Red Army and the White Army, and finally forced to join the Soviet Union and become its important allied country. It was not until decades later that it regained independence after the collapse of the Soviet Union. At present, Romania does not have enough strength to win and hold the entire Ukraine. It is true that the coal resources of Donbu are a natural heavy industry base, but it is too far from Romania, and Romania does not have enough population to assimilate the region. So he can only hit the idea of Western Ukraine. However, for the Ukrainian government to agree to divide nearly 1/3 of its territory to Romania, this is completely impossible. That's why he came up with one and let him accept the amount of compensation that Ukraine couldn't come up with in a short time. And it also stipulates that Romania will not withdraw its unreasonable demands without compensation. In order to set this amount, Edel also asked the intelligence department to check the financial situation and economic situation of Ukraine over the years. So in the face of Barnosk's inquiry, Prime Minister Brezhnev could only use one sentence: this is a secret, you will know later. To fool the past. Faced with the meaning of Prime Minister Brezhnev's words, Barnosk knew that he should not inquire. Then they went back to their residence to recharge their batteries and prepare for the next day's peace talks. The next day, when they negotiated with the Ukrainian delegation again, it was obvious that their attitude had softened a lot. It appears that Prime Minister Brezhnev's approach worked yesterday, giving them confidence in the negotiations. Originally, the negotiation was a negotiation between you and me to make compromises and reach a consensus. In the face of Ukrainians who can't stand upright, everyone knows that now is the time to let the other side submit. So next, they took advantage of the lack of confidence of the Ukrainians to pursue and fight. After nearly a month of negotiations, they finally got the Ukrainian government to sign the peace treaty. However, in order to get Ukraine to sign the name, Romania still made a lot of concessions, but did not retreat in a few key points. The final signed terms are as follows. First, this conflict was caused by a misunderstanding between the two countries, and for Dork, who was killed in the conflict, the Ukrainian government gave compensation for humanitarian reasons. Second, with regard to the East Moldavia region, the two sides respect the wishes of the people in the region, and after 15 days, let the local residents decide to vote on the ownership of the region. Third, as the initiator of the armistice, the Ukrainian government will give Romania 2 billion lei in reparations. The indemnity will be paid in foreign exchange, precious metals, minerals, grains, etc., of which grains and minerals will be subject to 92% of the international market price. Fourth, for the Romanian army currently in western Ukraine, it can be temporarily stationed locally. However, you must leave immediately after Ukraine has paid Romania's indemnity, no later than 7 days after the payment is completed. Fifth, in the end, the two countries made concessions to each other. However, judging from the content of the terms, Ukraine has suffered a big loss. But who made them perform too poorly on the battlefield, and no one in the world can help them speak, so they can only bear it. Now the two documents signed with the names of the heads of their respective delegations will be brought back to their respective countries. When the political heads of the two countries sign, it will represent that the disputes between the two countries have been resolved. If this is the case, who knows? Equals. Chapter 389 Kiel Sailor Revolt. Inside the palace, Edel sat in a chair and carefully reviewed the negotiated contract terms. In front of him stood the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister who were in charge of the negotiations. The contract had been reviewed by the Parliament, and the King had to sign it to take effect. Even if he had seen the copy before, Edel carefully reviewed the contract terms. It's not that he doesn't trust the two, it's that he takes responsibility for his work. After reading it, Edel put down the contract and said to the two, "Thank you for your hard work, I'm very satisfied with this negotiation." Facing the King's thanks, the two replied in unison, "It's not hard work, it's all for the benefit of the Kingdom of Romania." The main reason is that the Ukrainians realize the huge gap in strength with the kingdom, so that the contract can be negotiated. Listening to the two polite answers, Edel picked up the brush and signed the name in the lower right corner of the contract. Now that the contract has been signed, it can take effect. Then he handed it to the Prime Minister, and when the Prime Minister took the contract text, he said, "This peace negotiation takes a lot of energy, so you should rest for 2 days." In the face of the King's concern, Prime Minister Bricianu, who took the text, said with a wry smile, "After so long, the documents waiting for me to process in the government have been piled up to 2 feet high. Now there is no time to rest. Next time." Facing the Prime Minister's concerns about government affairs, Edel couldn't take it and said, "Okay, after the war is over, I'll give you a vacation. It's good to take care of your body. The grey hair on your head has grown a lot. This is all." Tired. Seeing that the King was concerned about his grey hair, Prime Minister Bricianu couldn't accept this. He could only shrug his shoulders awkwardly and smile. The Prime Minister can't rest because of work, but Foreign Minister Barnosk is moved. Thank you, Your Majesty, for your concern. Don't tell me this old bone of mine really needs a rest after nearly a month of tossing. Facing the Foreign Secretary's gag, Edel said with a smile, "It's okay, but I can't tire my Foreign Secretary. There are still important negotiation tasks that need to use you." Neither of them were stupid. They knew that the most important thing next, of course, was the meeting to divide the spoils after the war. At that time, a dozen or 20 countries, large and small, will all compete for their own interests from the Allies, which will not be an easy job at that time. Right now, Germany is struggling to support it, and everyone knows that its failure is just around the corner. After sending the two away, Edel was preparing to go to the General Staff to have a look. By the way, I asked Admiral Ploiesti to talk about the post-war army. I didn't think about it when I walked to the door and almost collided with someone. After Edel saw the person in front of him clearly, he asked curiously, "Karist, what's wrong with you today, so anxious?" When the captain of the guard who was supported saw Edel in front of him, he panted and said to the King, "Your Majesty, we just got the news that there was a sailor rebellion in Kiel, Germany. This is a telegram." Karist's shocking words immediately opened Edel's dusty memory. Kiel Marine Rebellion, German surrender, Treaty of Versailles. Edel didn't take the telegram, but instead pulled the captain of the bodyguard and said, "Let's go in and talk." After pulling his captain into the room, Edel took the telegram and read it. The Kiel Sailors' Uprising was an important event that marked the defeat of Germany. Before, he was worried that, because of his stirring, this event would disappear, but it still seems to have happened. "I just don't know how this event is different from my previous life." According to intelligence, the reason for the Kiel Sailor Uprising was the same as in the previous life. It was all caused by ordering the High Seas Fleet to fight in June and July. In order to prevent the German army from transferring reinforcement to the attacked area, the Allied powers moved from Verdun to the Atlantic coastline. The entire front line, with a width of more than 400 kilometers, launched a full-scale attack point. Since the German army has been in the war for 4 years, it has already been exhausted, and it is simply unable to resist such a huge offensive. And the front line has steadily advanced to the German-French border before the war. In this battle, the Allies captured a total of 190,000 German prisoners of war. The decline of the Germans' will to resist, and the increase in the number of prisoners in this attack, shocked the high-level officials. In order to boost the morale of the army, Ludendorff, Hindenburg and others thought of a way to let the Navy attack point. So on August 23rd, the Naval Command ordered the German High Seas Fleet in Kiel to go out to sea to fight the British, and if they failed, sink gloriously. Attempts to bring the High Seas Fleet through a decisive battle to motivate the currently demoralized German army. However, the officers and soldiers of the fleet who were abandoned were extremely angry with the order of the Naval Command. No one wants to be sacrificed, and there is no hope in sight. Therefore, with the connivance of the senior officers of the fleet, on August 27th, nearly 80,000 sailors stepped off the battleship, embraced the streets of Kiel city, and held a demonstration point. The actions of the sailors were quickly met with enthusiastic responses from the workers. Under the leadership of the sailors, the demonstration soon developed into armed uprisings, and quickly occupied strategically important places. At the same time, the Soviets of Workers' Deputies and the Soviets of Soldiers' Deputies were also established in Kiel Point to make the uprising a success. Kiel workers held a citywide general strike on September 5th to support the sailors' uprising point. When the German government got news of the sailors' uprising, it was astonished. Immediately, 6 infantry companies were sent from the field to suppress it. But what the German government did not expect was that 4 of them turned against each other and joined the ranks of the insurgent army. Soon Kiel was under the control of the Soviet of Engineers Deputies. News of the uprising of Kiel's sailors was immediately telegraphed to the world. As the head of the Romanian intelligence department, Karest also found Edel for the first time and informed him of the news. After reading the telegram, Edel walked back and forth in the room, constantly thinking about the impact on Romania. This event will make Germany surrender quickly, but there are still many things that Romania has not finished during this period. For example, the Hungarian cleanup work in the occupied area, the referendum in Eastern Moldavia, and what to do with the Poles in Galicia. Whether to negotiate with the future Polish government, let them pick it up, or what to do, you need to make up your own mind. Karest looked at Edel, who kept walking and thinking about problems, and did not dare to let out the air. Edel, who had been wandering all the time, finally stopped, and he said to Karest in front of him, now dispatching people to pay close attention to the situation in Germany. I want to know their movements at any time. In addition, I will send a report to Admiral Salomik. Let him speed up the cleanup. Also, let the Prime Minister speed up the referendum in East Moldavia. I want to see them join the Kingdom of Romania within a month. Facing Edel several consecutive orders, Karest quickly wrote it down. Your Majesty, I'll do it now. Go. After sending off the captain of the guard, Edel thought inwardly, it looks like the war is coming to an end, and the next thing to do is to secure Romania's interests. Chapter 390 Influenza Outbreak. After Edel's order was issued, the Transylvanian army, under the leadership of General Salomik, accelerated the work of clearing the Hungarians. They used to worry about reputation and other people's reactions, and now they don't care at all. A large number of Hungarians, escorted by soldiers, crossed the Tisza River with their belongings and cried to the Hungarian army on the other side of the river. It's just that the Hungarian soldiers are now unable to seek justice for these people in their own country, and now they are unable to protect themselves. Because the Allies did not decide on their punishment or reparations, and now they themselves do not know what to do. In Eastern Moldavia, calls for a referendum to join the Kingdom of Romania are also growing. There have always been crowds cheering around the Romanian garrison in the region, some spontaneously and some organized. The local media also sang praises to this, saying that this is the embodiment of democracy in East Moldavia. In Romania, the domestic media also echoed each other, focusing on promoting the East Moldavia region which has been the gathering place of the Romanian people since ancient times, and now it is time for them to return. Several things Edel focused on were proceeding in an orderly manner, which comforted him. However, in the area where he has not been paid attention, a disaster that is about to sweep the world is coming. On August 12th, a British ship, the Montella, just left the Sierra Leone region of West Africa, which was full of goods purchased from the region. First Mate Wells was standing on the bow, holding a telescope to check the nearby sea conditions. Cough, cough, cough. A cough interrupted First Officer Wells. What's the matter with you, George? After collecting the binoculars, Wells looked at a crew member who kept coughing and asked with concern. Facing the concern of the chief officer, the crew member named George replied nonchalantly, "It is estimated that he will catch a cold at the latest, and he has some colds. You can't do this. Go to Dr. Ruth to get some medicine later. We still need half a month to return to the UK. Okay, cough, cough, cough. I'll go in a while. Then go as soon as possible. I don't want you to cause other people to cough." Seeing George, who couldn't help coughing when he spoke, Wells had to ask him to get medical treatment as soon as possible. But crew George's cough, instead of getting better after being treated by Dr. Ruth, the condition worsened. In addition to high fever and headache, there were also bluish complexion and hematosis. More importantly, the rest of the crew also became coughing. By the time they got off the coast of Portugal, half of the people on the ship were sick, including First Officer Wells, and Dr. Ruth on the ship had nothing to do. And the poor crewman George also left, and the Montella crew had to throw his body into the sea to prevent the infection from intensifying and quarantine the sick crew member. However, how can the small cargo ship be isolated from the virus, and many crew members have been infected? By the time the Montella arrived in the UK, 3/4 of its crew had been infected, and 1/10 of them had died. In fact, the British government should pay attention to this situation immediately, but the surging situation of the current war has made others too busy to pay attention. Therefore, when the Montella arrived in the UK, the sick crew members disembarked one after another to seek medical treatment by themselves. In their opinion, the poor medical treatment must be the result of the insufficient level of the doctors on board. In this way, the patients spread out immediately, and on September 2nd, cases of this influenza virus were found in many places in the UK. On September 5th, a case of influenza virus also broke out in France. On September 11th, a case of influenza virus broke out in the United States. On September 12th, a case of influenza virus broke out in the Far East. In just half a month, this flu virus broke out all over the world. Many people are normal in the morning, get sick at noon, and die at night. Many cities restricted citizens from going to public places, and movie theaters, dance halls, sports venues, etc. were closed for long periods of time. Unlike past influenzas, this wave of influenza has a particularly high mortality rate among young adults aged 20 to 35. This made the army concentrated among young and middle-aged people become the hardest hit area, and the Allied offensive was forced to stop. Now no one is thinking about war, but about treating the sick. At the end of World War I, countries are spreading good news, and Spain is very honest in breaking out the flu in its own country, so this is also called Spanish influenza. As a global flu with a high fatality rate, Romania is of course not immune. The flu virus was discovered in Romania on September 8th. During this time, Edel, who was extremely sensitive to the flu virus, immediately ordered martial law across the country to fight the flu virus. At the same time, Helk, the Minister of Health, was ordered to send people to monitor trends in areas where influenza outbreaks may occur, and to send people to publicize measures to prevent influenza among residents. For those who have been infected, they are immediately forced to quarantine. Moreover, the Prime Minister is also asked to bring the government departments to cooperate with its work immediately. This has kept Prime Minister Bricianu busy on the ground. He has to manage the referendum in East Moldavia and cooperate with the health department in the prevention and control of influenza, which is also depressing enough. The Romanian people also cooperated, in turn, in the face of the government's actions, who made this flu menacing, and the fatality rate was very high. Many people were surrounded by patients, which really scared them. In the Romanian military camp, martial law was immediately closed, and they were all frightened by the news from Western Europe. The fatality rate of 3%-7% is comparable to the loss on the battlefield, and everyone will be afraid. But despite Romania's efforts, the number of cases is still increasing. And the most worrying thing about this flu is that there is no drug treatment, or there is not enough effective drug treatment. This caused everyone to be worried, for fear that they would be infected with the flu virus for a time. All domestic production and living materials became stagnant, and the materials on the dock were piled up like a mountain, but no one went to work because of the fear of the flu virus. The people working in the factory are also sparse, and the streets have become deserted, and everyone is trying to minimize going out. According to the statistics after the fact, Romania's economic index has dropped by 40% during this period, which is completely equivalent to entering a state of economic crisis, but it's all worth it. Because Romania responded correctly during this period, the death toll from the flu was also extremely low in Europe. The flu only killed 42,100 people, which is 2/3 less than the 127,000 people in Bulgaria next door, not to mention the gap between the populations of the two countries that has more than doubled. And this flu has really caused a lot of losses to all countries. The global death toll has exceeded this war. It can be said that it is a total catastrophe. Chapter 391 The Emperor abdicates. The flu virus sweeping the world has caused great headaches for governments of all countries, and the most troublesome is the countries participating in the war. If you want to choose the most uncomfortable country among the warring countries, it must be Germany. Facing the influence of the Kiel sailors' uprising and the double impact of the influenza virus, the German government has actually been unable to maintain the situation. In fact, Germany may still be able to resist 1 or 2 militarily with the Allies. Currently its troops have retreated to the German-French border in central Belgium, but the populace despaired of years of starvation and the prospect of no victory. Moreover, the propaganda used by the Allies in order to destroy the morale of the German people has also played a large role. Among the many propagandas of the Allies, they all promised that Germany would not be punished too harshly as long as it surrendered. It was the people who couldn't bear the hunger, cold and despair, and had great expectations for the words of the Allied powers, so these emotionally dominated people thought, why can't this war with no hope be ended? The left-wing party, which has been advocating a truce, has the support of the majority of the population. And relying on the support of these people, these parties have grown sufficiently during this period. After the naval uprising in Kiel, armed uprisings took place in Hamburg, Bremen, Leipzig, Munich and other places, so it is not difficult to understand. These insurgents also established Soviets of workers and soldiers deputies, in reference to the possible repression of the army and the Russian Revolution. And the most crucial uprising came from the capital Berlin. On September 8th, under the call of the Spartacists, the predecessor of the German Communist Party, workers and soldiers staged a general strike and armed uprising in Berlin. On the 9th, Berlin workers and soldiers occupied the police headquarters, telegraph office, parliament, other important institutions and barracks. The leader of the Spartak League, Karol Liebknecht, who led the uprising, announced the establishment of the Liberal Socialist Republic on the balcony of the palace. Together with Rosa Luxemburg, he founded the Red Flag and put forward the slogan of the struggle for the establishment of a united German Socialist Republic. The uprising in Berlin dealt the heaviest blow to Wilhelm II at the headquarters of the Spade Army in Belgium. In the face of the uprising movement across the country, the German high level knew that a truce was necessary. However, the people's grievances against the current government must find someone to come to power to resolve their grievances. At present, the only candidate who can be accepted by the people is the leader of the Social Democratic Party, Friedrich Ebert. Only he can control the current restless situation in Germany. Friedrich Albert was born in Heidelberg on February 4, 1871. His father was a tailor. He worked as a harness worker and made saddles in his early years. In 1891 joined the German Social Democratic Party. In 1893 he became editor-in-chief of the Bremel National. In 1905 he was secretary of the Central Executive Committee of the German Social Democratic Party. He is a very persuasive orator. believes in trade unionism, and is not much interested in Marx's ideological theory, and is more concerned with the improvement of workers' practical life, as well as improving their social status and moral values. So he was a moderate social democratic leader, always devoted to practical work and avoiding theoretical disputes, and his outstanding work ability helped it to be the chairman of the German Social Democratic Party after the death of former chairman Abel in 1913. Under his leadership, the status of the Democratic Party has improved significantly. Therefore, he is also the most suitable candidate to replace Germany at present point. However, Albert's promise to reform a coalition government is also conditional. First, Germany needs to get the understanding of the Entente countries. In addition, the Kaiser must abdicate and cancel the title of German Kaiser, because the German Empire will be changed to a republic. In the face of Albert's request, the German high-level officials who were frightened by the massive uprising in the country fully accepted it. After finding a candidate to succeed the government, in order to get the Allies to agree to Germany's request for a truce, Chief of Staff Ludendorff resigned and was replaced by William Groener. After taking over the post of Chief of General Staff, General Groener suggested to Kaiser Wilhelm II, in order to ensure that the emperor is not judged by the Allies, it is best to seek asylum in a neutral country. The most suitable country at present is the Netherlands, which has always remained neutral, because he is related to Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands, and the two are better. And Groener assured the Kaiser that, under Field Marshal Hindenburg, the Germans would retreat to Germany without suppressing the revolution. Wilhelm II saw a model soldier who firmly supported the emperor, and Marshal Hindenburg also tacitly took a tacit attitude towards it. I feel like I'm over. Then Wilhelm II drafted his edict of abdication at the Spade Army headquarters. The full text is as follows: I permanently relinquish all power as King of the Kingdom of Prussia and Emperor of Germany at the same time. At the same time I relieve all civil servants of the German Empire and Prussia, all officers, sergeants, naval units, Prussian army, and all military units that have sworn allegiance to me as Emperor of the Reich. I hope they can help those in real power in Germany to protect the German people against the looming dangers of anarchy, starvation and foreign domination until a new order in the German Reich is established. After announcing his abdication to the whole country, William II and his family immediately issued an asylum application to the Netherlands. The Dutch government, which has always been neutral, accepted the application, and William's family rushed to Amsterdam without stopping. Here, Queen Wilhelmina set up a manor in Doorn for William II, in order to provide him with a place to live. For the rest of his life, Wilhelm II would live here. For the uprising in Germany that forced the abdication of Kaiser Wilhelm II, the Allies gave positive comments. In the Times, the Kaiser's abdication was commented that this megalomaniac, war madman, finally slumped from his evil throne, gave Germany a new lease of life. The German people now finally know that everything they have encountered was given by the culprit, and now the world will return to peace. When Edel heard the news of the Kaiser's abdication, he called the captain of the bodyguard, sent 10 million lei to the Kaiser in the Netherlands. I heard that the German government has not yet confiscated the royal family's property. They should have no shortage of funds. And if it is sent like this, will they accept it? Facing Kerist's words, Edel sighed and replied, I know they have no shortage of funds, but my uncle William and I are both the Hohenzollern family. Although they are the main line, we are the side branch. This is on behalf of my heart. They will accept it. Edel's words dispelled the chief guard's doubts, and he immediately said, okay, your majesty, I'll have someone send it to them. Go. After sending off his chief guard, Edel sighed. Next, it's time for Germany to truce and negotiate. Hey Germany, are you ready to accept the punishment of defeat? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 392 Germany is defeated. Edda is right in lamenting that Germany is not yet ready for the Allied punishment. After Kaiser Wilhelm II issued the Edict of Abdication and took refuge in the Netherlands, the German Empire collapsed, and millions of German troops on the front lost their allegiance. At home, Friedrich Ebert, who was about to take over as the head of the government, asked Maximum von Baden, the last chancellor of the German Empire, to sign a truce with the Allies before taking over as the head of the reorganized government. Because the signing of the armistice that defeats the war is completely a disaster for a political figure, which will destroy his political life. This was an impossible condition to accept for Mr. Albert, who aimed to unify the political forces of post-war Germany. Therefore, in the face of this obviously ruining the future, only Baden, who was brought to power specifically for this matter, did it. So on September 16th, the Prime Minister of Baden, who was pushed out as a top bag, rushed to France to discuss the armistice affairs with the few government personnel at present. When the car for the German peace talks arrived at the station in the forest of Compiègne, northeast of Paris, the train that Foch, Commander-in-Chief of the Allied forces, was passing by. In order to be in a hurry and to facilitate the peace talks, Prime Minister Baden hurriedly boarded the carriage that Foch was in. How similar it was to Russia in March 1917, at 5 o'clock in the morning. After breakfast, the Allied Commander-in-Chief Foch, who was waiting for the German delegation to surrender, was in a good mood. The civil strife of the mortal enemy made him happy. Standing in the train under his command, he said to General Weygand, his chief of staff, "If we refuse their surrender, then the People's Committee in Berlin will collapse within a few weeks." Something in short. Admiral Maxim Weygand looked at Marshal Foch, who was already old, had personally experienced the Franco-Prussian War, and was determined to take revenge. In a hoarse voice, "If the People's Councils in Berlin fall, they will be replaced by the Spartacists. They are the real Bolsheviks, just like the Russian Bolsheviks." It seems that Admiral Weygand is a little worried about the situation in Germany. He is worried that Germany will become red like Russia. So what? Philip Foch stroked his white beard and said nonchalantly, "We can defeat them. Bolsheviks in Germany, Bolsheviks in Russia. Now is the weakest time for these two countries. Do you understand? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." In Fuchs's view, the current Allied forces still have millions of soldiers armed to the teeth, as well as weapons and supplies for the rich man of the United States. And the Bolsheviks in Germany and Russia were so weak. If you hit another year or two, you can crush them all. In this way, France will be able to dominate Europe, and peace will be a real guarantee. In the face of Marshal Fuchs's bellicose words, Admiral Weygand answered seriously, "But in this case, our people will not agree. For this war, we sacrificed too much. In fact, France is already standing on the edge of the cliff. Indeed, among the Entente countries currently participating in the war, apart from Russia, which has collapsed, France has suffered the most. Apart from the loss of millions of young and middle-aged people, its northern territories were completely scorched. If the Americans hadn't acted in time, it would have been France that collapsed now. Moreover, the United Kingdom and the United States will definitely not accept that they will continue to fight and take chestnuts from the fire for France to dominate Europe. So Marshal Fuchs's idea was completely unworkable. But in such a light-hearted manner for Germany, what we have won is not peace at all, but a 20-year armistice. Marshal Foch reiterated his point of view. 20 years from now, we will regret today's short-sightedness. The reason for Foch's words was that he thought the truce was too benevolent. In Foch's view, it would be better to bring Germany back to the state it was in before the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, in order to eliminate the German threat to France. And Fuchs's request to let the French family dominate cannot be accepted by the United Kingdom and the United States. They do not want to let France get the most benefit after defeating Germany. So this decision, which seems to benefit France the most, is unlikely to be accepted by both countries. Facing Fuchs's words, General Weygand could only helplessly shake his head. In fact, in Weygand's view, the current armistice terms are too harsh for Germany. He had also seen the terms long ago, which required the German troops to withdraw from the left bank of the Rhine, together with the bridgehead on the right bank, within 30 days, to be occupied by the Allies. This one will kill Germany. The left bank of the Rhine is the famous Ruhr area. This is Germany's coal and iron base. This region produces 80% of the country's hard coal, 90% of the coke, and concentrates 65% of the country's steel production capacity. It can be said that this article alone will allow the Allies to hold Germany 7 inches and make it a mobile point. In addition, the German army was required to withdraw from the occupied Belgium, France, Luxembourg, and Alsace-Lorraine within 15 days. Yes, the Alsace-Lorraine region, which France has never forgotten, is finally returning to the embrace of France. This speaks of the disposition of the Germans on the Western Front, and then it is the turn of the Eastern Front. All German troops still stationed on pre-war territory belonging to Austria-Hungary, Turkey and fighting in East Africa shall be withdrawn immediately to within the German borders of August 1, 1914. All German troops stationed on pre-war Russian territory should also return to German territory when the Allied powers deem the time appropriate. Yes, the Allies didn't think it was time to withdraw from the German forces on pre-war Russian territory. The hatred of Soviet Russia made the Allies temporarily need the German troops to continue to station in the original Russian territory. The next step is that the Allied prisoners of war should be repatriated immediately, and the German prisoners of war should be placed by the Allies in any way they deem fit, and the Treaty of Bucharest should be abrogated. The last and most critical one at present is that the German army should completely hand over its main equipment and means of transport of its land, naval and air forces. This was intended to disarm Germany, which would also mean that as long as Germany signed an armistice, its fate would be entirely in the hands of the Allies. While Fuchsi and Wedegang were talking, the guards came up to report. The German delegation is here. Let them in. Following Fuchsi's words, it took 10 hours to travel, and Chancellor Baden, the representative of the German government who had just arrived in Campion Forest, immediately boarded the carriage. We already know your purpose. Marshal Fuchsi took out an armistice treaty and handed it to Baden. This is our request. If you agree, sign it, and if you don't agree, we will continue to fight. In the face of Fuchsi's cold words, Baden didn't care to pick up the armistice treaty and look at it, but the more he looked at it, the more ugly he looked, and finally he said, after letting go of the treaty, "This armistice treaty is too harsh." Facing Baden's words, Fuchsi took a puff of his pipe and said, "You don't need to tell me this, you just need to sign or leave." Foch's words caused some commotion among the German delegates, who did not expect the Entente to be so tough. So a group of people are talking in a low voice, but the result of mutual communication is frustrating. At present, Germany has absolutely no ability to oppose this armistice agreement, so in the end, after struggling for more than 10 minutes, Baden signed the agreement on behalf of the German government. The war is over. Chapter 393 Relief of Germany. When Germany signed the armistice, everyone cheered for ending the war. Soldiers on both sides left the trenches to say goodbye to their former opponents. They will leave this hellish environment, change into clean clothes, eat delicious food, and then fall asleep on the soft bed. Don't worry about artillery shells, and don't worry about enemy sneak attacks. People in Germany are also thinking about a peaceful life in the future. The war is over, and the current shortage of supplies will also be alleviated. Soon they will be replenished with supplies from all over the world, and they will no longer be dominated by hunger and severe cold. The predicament of the shortage of supplies for several years will also be improved. Everything is a good start. It's just that in the last few days, there were no German ports, that foreign civilian ships entered, and no trains carrying living materials came on land. Facing the doubts of the German people, the Allied countries responded that they would not release the blockade until the German army was disarmed. In the face of the reply of the Allied powers, the naive German soldiers and civilians believed it, and they handed over a huge amount of arms and materials to the Allied powers. The German naval ships, which were built with a lot of money, were also escorted by the Allied powers and drove to Scapa Flow. In order to disarm these German warships, which were considered to be the most dangerous confidants, the Allied powers ordered that all their guns have been dismantled. The number of sailors was limited to a minimum, and the fuel they carried was barely enough to keep the fleet sailing around the Orkney Islands waters. However, after disarming the German army, the Allies still did not release the blockade against Germany. And this time their rhetoric must wait until Germany agrees to the compensation clause. As for the amount of compensation for Germany's invasion of other countries, information is still being collected. In the face of the rhetoric of the Allied powers, the German people now have absolutely no way to object. After being disarmed, Germany was like a lamb to be slaughtered and had to wait. The government can wait, but the people can't. Years of war not only caused many casualties to German soldiers and civilians, but also reduced domestic production to a minimum, especially agricultural production because too many people are invested in war-related sectors. The grain production in Germany is also decreasing year by year, especially this year, which has been reduced to 68% of the pre-war level. More importantly, Germany's production of grain is not enough to belong to the point where it needs to import grain. The continuous war made it impossible for them to import food and other living materials from other countries. Now facing the unwillingness of the Allied countries to lift the blockade, the German people can only wait in agony, hoping that the compensation payment will be reviewed as soon as possible. However, the food shortage caused by Germany itself this time has allowed one person to see an opportunity in the palace in Bucharest. Edel is very interested in the current situation of extreme food shortage in Germany. For this reason, he also specially asked the intelligence department to collect the current level of food shortages across Germany. Your Majesty, the food shortage situation is very serious all over Germany at present. In Stuttgart, the German people can only get a minimum of 300 grams of food per day. In Munich, the people in this area can get 310 grams of food per day. As for Berlin here, its daily food can get a ration of 350 grams. Our survey found that the gap between the food obtained in Germany from the west to the east is gradually widening. Compared with the shortage of food in the west, the east is much better. The main reason is that the east has Poland and the former Russian territories have been partially supplemented. But with the signing of the armistice, the gap between the east and the west will gradually decrease. Edel carefully listened to the information from the investigation by the chief guard, and it seemed that the lives of the German people were really difficult at present. Then it's time to show the German people the hand of friendship from Romania. In Edel's view, when the German people are suffering from hunger and cold, a warm and selfless help will reap endless gratitude, which will help to change Romania in the image of the German public. Think about it. When you were too hungry, the previous enemy gave him a piece of food and then said, "I'm sorry, I had no choice but to beat you before, and I can't do anything about it. I hope this food can relieve you pain." In the face of him holding life-saving food and sincerely apologizing, you can have a lot of resentment against him in your heart. Next, I will accompany you for a while, pay attention to your state, and then ask for help. It is estimated that you will immediately regard him as a true friend. Of course, it is not so simple between countries, but the ideas are the same, but the practice is slightly different. Therefore, Edel immediately called the Prime Minister to discuss after learning about the current food shortage in Germany. After all, this matter still requires the government to come forward to mobilize materials, and it can't do it on its own. It's good to discuss it and listen to the Prime Minister's opinion. After recruiting Prime Minister Bricianu, who was busy with his feet on the ground, Edel told him his plans. After listening to Edel's words, Prime Minister Bricianu frowned and said, "Your Majesty, this is a bit difficult." Hearing the Prime Minister's difficult words, Edel smiled and said, "Are you worried about the attitude of the United States, Britain and France?" "Yes, Your Majesty." Seeing that his monarch understood the relationship, Prime Minister Bricianu let go and said, "Obviously, this matter was initiated and organized by the three countries. If we break the blockade against Germany first, I'm afraid it will provoke the attitude of the United States, Britain and France towards us has changed drastically." Regarding the Prime Minister's concerns, Edel nodded and admitted, "You are right, this will indeed cause the three countries to be unhappy." After admitting one sentence first, Edel changed his words, "But we are not trying to completely solve the German famine problem. And the current grain storage in our country is far from that step." At the end of the talk, Edel gave a figure that he considered. 200,000 tons of grain. "In the name of the Hohenzollern family I was born in, I will help the German people. The cost is also paid by me, so that the German people can feel the food from Romania bona fide." Okay. Prime Minister seeing that Prime Minister Bricianu was still trying to persuade himself, Edel interrupted and said, "It is good enough for Romania to express goodwill to Germany, and it is impossible for the Allied countries to change the way we treat us because of this incident attitude. That's it. Point in the face of Edel's strong decision. Prime Minister Bricianu could only answer, "Okay, Your Majesty. But this gift can only be done once." Seeing that the Prime Minister was a little unwilling to be forced to agree, Edel also knew that he needed to be appeased. "Prime Minister, please rest assured that this incident is only a special case. There will be no next time. I can guarantee this." After hearing Edel's assurances, Prime Minister Bricianu breathed a sigh of relief. "My own monarch is too strong and assertive. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing for the kingdom." After the two chatted for a while, Prime Minister Bricianu was about to leave, but at this time Edel remembered something and stopped him loudly. "Prime Minister, wait a minute." Turning around, Bricianu asked curiously, "Your Majesty, is there anything else? How are your preparations for this Paris Peace Conference?" The Paris Peace Conference that Edel asked about was a conference where the Allies negotiated compensation for the Allies. Romania, as one of the warring nations, certainly had the right to participate. Moreover, in order to obtain the victory that Romania deserves, Prime Minister Bricianu certainly did not dare to relax and had already identified the candidates for this peace meeting early. It's almost ready. This time, the Foreign Secretary and I will lead the team. That's good. After hearing the Prime Minister's answer, Edel waved to indicate that he understood. After the Prime Minister was sent away, the food donation to Germany was prepared very quickly. In fact, the needed food could be collected from the king's possessions. Edel made the announcement publicly on the 5th day, after consulting with the Prime Minister. Germany, on the other hand, welcomed the Romanian king's donation of food to the public. Albert, who just took over as the head of the coalition government, also publicly praised the Romanian monarch's righteous deeds in his busy schedule, calling him a saint with noble morals and a compassionate heart. Albert's words made Edel's face turn red. Listen to the saint. If he is donating more times, he is the spokesman of God in the world. But he knew that the future president of the Weimar government only wanted to express his goodwill to the Allies through him. But it was also good for him. Among German folks, there is praise for the Romanian monarch who donated donations during everyone's suffering, and even the image of Romania is much better in their eyes among them. A voice came out, saying that Romania did not want to go to war with Germany, but in order to regain the Transylvania area occupied by Austria-Hungary, it had to be forced to join the war. And Romania is already very grateful to Germany, because most of their achievements were built with German help. In their hearts, Romania has always been a German student, and it is the kind with very good grades. This kind of remark makes people who are currently depressed much better. No one wants their country to fall to second-rate status, especially when they were at the top. Gradually, these remarks spread to the ears of an Austrian-born corporal. It seems that these Romanians are not bad in nature. In a blink of an eye, he thought of the suffering that his beloved empire was currently experiencing, and held back his anger and said, "These damn Jewish capitalists have destroyed the empire. And they all deserve to go to hell." Regarding the issue of Romania's food aid to Germany, there was also a small disturbance within the Allies. However, in a telegram from the Romanian government, it was stated that this was just a little relief from the king to the suffering of the German people at present, and it was only for this time, and the small disturbances about this point also subsided. 200,000 tons of grain seems to be enough, but for the German people, it is only enough for the whole country to eat for 3 days, which is not a big problem. And judging from the performance of the Romanian army in the war, this is not a big problem. In this way, Edel's donation of food to the German people is over. Edel and Romania got a good name, and the German populace got a boon. As for now, Edel has withdrawn his attention to Germany. Many domestic affairs in Romania need his attention. But at present, he is most concerned about the upcoming Paris Peace Conference, which is the topic that Romania is most concerned about. Everyone is very concerned and excited about harvesting the spoils, and no one can avoid it. Chapter 394 Paris Peace Conference 1. The end of the war. In addition to making all the people cheer for it, there is still a lot of finishing work, such as competing for the interests of the defeated country, claiming the loss of various countries, and the various issues left behind need to find a place for everyone to negotiate. After some negotiation, Paris was chosen as the place of negotiation in order to compensate France for the greatest losses and the greatest contribution to the resistance against the Germans. So on November 23rd, representatives from all sides gathered in Paris, where they would negotiate claims and penalties against the Allied camp. As Romania's representatives, Prime Minister Brătianu and Foreign Minister Bănăsc have arrived in Paris with a delegation of nearly 100 people. Here, as in history, they can only discuss matters related to Romania. That's right, Romania can only negotiate proposals related to it at the moment. Despite their impressive performance in this war, Romania is still only a small country and cannot be joined by several major powers to discuss international affairs. Even if he is quite powerful in a small country, it will not work. Although Romania could not make changes in the status of the peace conference, Prime Minister Brătianu and his party were still given preferential treatment. On the day they arrived in Paris, they were warmly received by French Prime Minister Clemenceau. In the hall, the band played elegant music, and the guests with the glasses, interlaced, were chatting in a low voice. From their flamboyant attire and extraordinary conversation, it's hard to tell it's just a welcome dinner without listening to the accent. In this dinner party, if you look carefully, you will find that many people are looking at a position on the left side of the hall from time to time. That's right, the protagonist of this banquet, Romanian Prime Minister Brătianu, is standing there and having a pleasant conversation with people. And he was talking to an old man with grey hair and a squat stature in a decent evening dress. That's right, this is Clemenceau, the Prime Minister of Kazakhstan. Seeing Clemenceau smiled and said to Brătianu, "Your Excellency Prime Minister, I hope to make you feel the same as before when you come to Paris this time." Brătianu knew that Prime Minister Clemenceau was talking about his experience in studying in France. In fact, the Romanian elites love studying in France. Many people in the current cabinet have the experience of studying in France. Yeah, I haven't been to Paris for many years. It's still so charming, and the city can still exude its brilliance thanks to the struggle of the French military and civilians, who kept the city from being disturbed by the enemy. In addition, this time the banquet is very grand, and I need to thank the Prime Minister for your hospitality. When Prime Minister Brătianu praised the actions of the French army and the people, Clemenceau proudly replied, "This is what we should do. France has the ability to thwart the attack of the German devil. This war is an obvious example." That's right, Your Excellency, the glory of France is guarded by its people, and no one can take it away. The two gradually opened up in a common topic, and at this time Prime Minister Clemenceau said in a low voice, "Your Excellency Prime Minister, what do you think of the Russian Bolshevik?" Hearing the topic raised by Clemenceau, Prime Minister Brătianu moved in his heart. He knew that the meat scene was coming. As for Bolshevik, he and Edel had already negotiated that Romania must be shown to prevent its spread, so he said it without hesitation. In fact, our country believes that these Bolsheviks are the source of the unrest. You see, Russia is a mess under their leadership. Where can these anti-government element build a country? They only know how to make trouble. So we can't let these saboteurs disturb Europe. Peace. In response to Prime Minister Brătianu's answer, Clemenceau did not express any response. Instead, he spoke of another concern. At present, with the defeat of Austria-Hungary and Germany, the Bolsheviks in the region are very active in Germany, and these saboteurs in the Hungarian region have completely disrupted the local order, which is so worrying. In the face of Clemenceau's mention of the Bolsheviks in Germany and Hungary, Prime Minister Brătianu's mind was spinning rapidly. Is this testing Romania's attitude towards the two countries? Some Prime Minister Brătianu, who can't understand it, can only try to say, "I don't think the Bolsheviks in Germany should be worried, and the millions of returning troops have the ability to destroy them. Even if they can't destroy your country, it might be possible to lend a helping hand. As for the Hungarian Bolsheviks, if they make trouble, Romania will not sit idly by, and we have an obligation to help this country eliminate these unrest." Brătianu's words have been very obvious, and Romania does not care about Germany. And if there is a situation in Hungary, Romania can intervene. After hearing Prime Minister Brătianu's words, Clemenceau continued, "What if the Russian Bolsheviks help these people?" Brătianu replied firmly, "Then we will interrupt his clause and let these people know that it is the greatest kindness To let them live in this world. Yes, the Prime Minister is right. After Clemenceau praised, he continued, at present we are very worried about the situation in Russia, and we are afraid that these cancers will spread to the whole of Europe. At present, Romania is on the front line, so we must determine whether you are willing to act as a free world guard. Bricianu replied, of course, this is also what the Romanian military and civilians expect, and it is a duty to protect the peace of Europe. It's rare for Romania to have such an ambition, so we want Romania to take on the responsibility of preventing the spread of Bolshevik. Clemenceau draws a cake for Bricianu. However, we can only take responsibility for the south, and there is nothing we can do about the Polish plains in the north. Bricianu does not eat this set. He directly stated the current ability of Romania. Regarding the Romanian Prime Minister's words, Clemenceau shook his head and said, Prime Minister, don't worry, we can adjust this. Then he whispered a few words in Bricianu's ear. These words immediately made the Prime Minister's eyes widen. Real. Seeing the surprised expression on Prime Minister Bricianu's face, Clemenceau nodded and replied, yes, but this is a proposal we have already discussed, but it has not been announced yet. What did Clemenceau say to Bricianu that surprised him so much? Quite simply, His Excellency the Prime Minister told him that Poland was going to be rebuilt. Yes, this Poland, which has been divided up several times, has once again got the opportunity to be re-established. Speaking of Poland, other people's ancestors are also rich, and he has done it by punching Russia and kicking Prussia. However, after modern times, the fate of the Poles who played too much prestige was tragic. However, this time the establishment of Poland, Britain, and France also had their own selfish intentions. They hoped that this country could see the defeated Germany in the Red Russia. However, in distrust of the Poles' abilities, they wanted to find a helper for them. Looking around, only Romania, in southern Poland, has the strength to help them. As the biggest beneficiary of Poland after the establishment of France, they can only find help for it. That's why Clemenceau made this proposal to Bricianu. Let Poland and Romania form a military alliance in the face of the Soviet-Russian threat. They had thought about it carefully, and it would be good for Poland, and not bad for it. In terms of military strength, Romania is much stronger than the Poles. In terms of national strength, the newly rebuilt Poland is far less than Romania, which made a fortune in the war. Moreover, Poland is also on the main road from Soviet Russia to Central and Western Europe, and its terrain is also in the Great Plains that are easy to attack and difficult to defend. If they don't find a strong helper for them, this new country is likely to fall under the Soviet Union's front. Of course, Russia is still in the civil war, but after seeing the setbacks of the White Army, which it strongly assisted, Britain, France and other countries must have an insurance policy. Currently, Romania is an important part of this insurance. Your Excellency, this matter is so important that I can't express my position immediately. But I believe that, as long as the new government is willing to show goodwill to us, the success rate of this matter is very high. Bricianu did not immediately make a commitment to replace the Prime Minister, but Clemenceau was also very satisfied. At least Romania did not object to the proposal to form an alliance with Poland. I can understand Your Excellency Prime Minister's careful consideration, but I believe this matter is good for everyone. Your Excellency Prime Minister, let me accompany you to meet our wonderful economic people in France. After saying this, Clemenceau led Bricianu to introduce his famous French industrial and commercial personnel. It seems that for the gradually developing Romania, French capital is also trying to get a share of the pie. News of the French government's warm reception of the Romanian delegation spread that night. Representatives of many other countries are envious of Romania being entertained by France alone, but the British representative, one of the giants, has already seen France's intentions. Clemenceau is planning to find help in Eastern Europe and the Balkans, and neither Serbia nor Poland seems to reassure him. Prime Minister George, sitting on a reclining chair near the furnace hall, commented on the French intention. The deputy next to him asked, do we need to entertain them once? No need, they will feel the goodwill of the British Empire, and let Clemenceau stand up before hitting us in the eyes of Prime Minister George. As the world's most powerful country, one must have the confidence to be the most powerful country. Even if this war has seriously damaged their vitality, Romania is still not worthy of the British Empire to lean over and discuss issues with its counterparts. Prime Minister Bricianu didn't know it at all, and he became the focus of many people's attention overnight. It's just that, whether this is a good thing or a bad thing for Romania, no one knows. Chapter 395 Paris Peace Conference 2. Romanian Eagle. Things come and go quickly. When the peace meeting began, no one paid attention to Romania. Each delegation is fighting for its own country's best interests. The most fierce competition is undoubtedly the top 5 leaders and foreign ministers of the United States, France, Britain, Italy, and Japan. It is also called the 10-person meeting. All major issues are discussed and decided by them. Because of the regulations of the peace conference, the entire conference is divided into 3 forms: the Supreme Conference, the Special Conference, and the Plenary Conference. The Supreme Council is composed of 5 countries: the United States, Britain, France, Italy, and Japan. Since the discussion was about competing for the interests of the defeated allies, apart from China and Japan, Germany's rights in Europe and Africa were also the most fiercely contested point among them. Europe, the United States, Britain, France, and Italy, the most important countries, each negotiate an endless quarrel point among them. The main purpose of the Italian representative is to obtain the port of Fiume, so that it will become the base of Italian expansion in the Balkans. However, Italy's weak strength can only be regarded as a second-rate country compared with the United States, Britain, and France. In addition, it had 2 boats in the early days of the war, and it did not play much role after entering the war. Therefore, Orlando's request was rejected by the United States, Britain, and France. Before the war, Britain, France, and Russia promised Italy that they would give Fiume port and Dalmatia rights after the war, but they were rejected by the United States, Britain, and France. After winning point at the meeting of the top 5 in February, Orlando insisted that he could not return to China without Fiume, and even threatened domestic riots, while the United States, Britain, and France still opposed his demands. Orlando angrily left the venue, while the other attendees simply ignored. Orlando was helpless and quietly returned to the venue after a few days, continuing to play the role of a trooper. As for the United States, President Wilson was particularly fascinated by the plan to establish the League of Nations, not only because it was closely related to his political reputation and historical position, but also as the fundamental plan and the only way to replace Britain and France for domination of the world. Therefore, in his first speech at the Paris Peace Conference, he put forward the priority to discuss the issue of the League of Nations, emphasizing that the League of Nations and the peace treaty with Germany should be a unified and inseparable whole, binding on any country. But Britain and France are not interested. They advocated separating the two and prioritized the division of territory and war reparations. The opposing sides insist on their own words and refuse to give in to each other. Later, after 4 days of debate, the 10-member committee decided to hand over the League of Nations issue to a special committee headed by Wilson, who was responsible for formulating the draft treaty of the League of Nations. The Anglo-French conspiracy is to take the American plan off the agenda. To this end, they suggested that representatives of all small and medium countries should also participate in the committee, which would make the committee bloated and inefficient to delay time. Before the special committee began to work, Britain and France proposed to discuss the partition of the German colonies. Wilson woke up from a dream and was very dissatisfied with the tactics of Britain and France, so he again proposed that the Council of 10 should discuss the League of Nations. We cannot give the world the impression that the powers first carve up the defenseless parts of the world and then build the League of Nations, he said. As a result, the 10-member committee began to confront each other again. The meeting was tense, and Wilson was fierce, as were Lloyd George in England and Clemenceau in France. Under these circumstances, Wilson angrily stated that he would withdraw from the meeting if the League of Nations pact was not confirmed. The slick Lloyd George countered, "Only God knows when the complex process of making the League of Nations pact will be completed." Wilson replied, "As long as no one deliberately disturbs, the work of the committee can be over in 10 days." The American threat worked, and Britain and France had to back down. In fact, as Wilson said, after a series of intense consultations, the special committee finally formulated the draft of the League of Nations on December 18th as scheduled. On December 19th, Wilson reported the content of the draft to the plenary meeting in a solemn atmosphere, and it was unanimously approved. In the first round of struggle, Wilson barely prevailed. On the British side, its Prime Minister George was scheming, and in order to maintain the hegemony that Britain had begun to shake, he did his best at the Paris Peace Conference. He sometimes sided with France against the United States, and sometimes formed an alliance with the United States to suppress France. When the US and France were at an inexorable tussle, he often acted as a mediator in the process, thus reaping a lot of benefits for Britain. As for France, it was proposed by Prime Minister Clemenceau, President of the General Assembly. France not only wanted to take back Alsace and Lorraine, but also moved the French border eastward to the Rhine, and advocated the merger of the German provinces on the left bank of the Rhine into an independent state. France's naked desire to weaken Germany to the greatest extent and establish French hegemonic ambitions on the European continent was rejected by Britain, France, and Italy from the very beginning. They did not want to defeat Germany, to find a hegemon for the continent. In the face of fierce opposition from the United States, Britain and Italy, Clemenceau had to give up this condition. Although he was forced to give up the requirement to establish the Rhine, in exchange, he offered to occupy the left bank of the Rhine by the Allied troops for 30 years and hand over the Saar mines to France. The Saar mining area mentioned by Clemenceau is the city of Saar near the French border, where there is an industrial and transportation center with a huge coal seam. Its factories produced iron and steel, sugar, beer, pottery, optical instruments, machinery and building materials. In particular, the coal industry here can meet 1/3 of the needs of the Ruhr region. So in order to further pinpoint the strength of Germany, Clemenceau raised the Saar problem. U.S. President Wilson was annoyed by the new French demand. He said impatiently, he never heard of another thrall question. In this regard, Clemenceau was furious, attacked Wilson as a pro-German element, and firmly declared, no French Prime Minister will sign a treaty that does not incorporate Saarland into France. But Wilson did not show weakness. He sneered at Clemenceau coldly and said, you mean that, if France does not get what it wants, it will refuse to cooperate with us? It seems that you want me to return home. Faced with the threat of the creditor, Clemenceau replied, I don't want you to go home, but I want to go home myself. Regarding the question of thrall, it just broke up like this. Facing the disputes between the United States and France, the old and slick Lloyd George fully exerted his means. He first formed an alliance with President Wilson on the issue, and then privately negotiated with Clemenceau that the United States could not leave the peace conference, suggesting that it could move Saar from France to a mandate of time. Clemenceau was a little powerless to the pressure of the Anglo-American alliance. Considering that France was unable to maintain the European order without the support of the United Kingdom and the United States, he agreed to the conditions given by Prime Minister George. However, the two sides had a dispute over the duration of the mandate. The French side believes that the time should be 25 years, while the United Kingdom and the United States believe that this time is too long and will provoke Germany to provoke new disputes in Europe in the future, so the proposal is 10 years. After another quarrel, they finally gave a 15-year period acceptable to both parties. After 15 years, the Saar mining area held a referendum to decide its own ownership. In order to completely weaken Germany, France also put forward 3 demands. One is to establish a powerful Poland including Poznan and Danzig in the east of Germany. The reason is to deal with the red threat from Russia. The second is to try to dig out the Germans' pockets and demand that Germany must compensate 600 billion to 800 billion gold marks for war losses. The third is to completely destroy the German military machine, especially to limit the number of German troops and arms production. These French demands were opposed to varying degrees by the United Kingdom and the United States. The United Kingdom and the United States believed that the establishment of a new Poland in accordance with the French blueprint meant the strengthening of France's position in Europe, and therefore did not agree with France's claim. Lloyd George said to Clemenceau, don't build a new Alsace-Lorraine. Neither Britain nor the United States wants to use Germany's reparations to strengthen France's power, especially the United States is more Worried that France's excess of demands will kill Germany, the hen that lays eggs, Lloyd George proposed that the reparations should not be excessive and could only be borne by the generation that fought in the war. Wilson advocated not to determine the amount of compensation. The issue can be resolved by a special committee study. Point on the issue of restricting German armaments. Britain and the United States have different intentions from France. Their main interest was to weaken Germany's naval power, while they were lenient with the army, leaving Germany with the force necessary to suppress the Bolsheviks. When talking about the establishment of Poland, Prime Minister Brezhnev, who has been watching this drama, is also involved, because the Polish delegation pointed out that the Lviv area currently occupied by Romania has always been a gathering place for Poles, and it is hoped that Romania will teach this area to Poland, not the current Ukrainian government. Therefore, Prime Minister Brezhnev also had the honor to join the discussion on the Polish issue. Chapter 396, Paris Peace Conference, Part 2. Everyone, we have invited the Romanian representative, and we can discuss it now. After days of quarrels and negotiations, the representatives of several countries present were somewhat exhausted. After seeing the arrival of Prime Minister Brezhnev, President Wilson glanced at Dmowski, the Polish representative, who was complicating the Polish issue. As the chairman of the Polish National Committee established in Paris in 1917, Dmowski's skin is still thick enough to pretend not to see it, because he knew that this meeting would decide the status of Poland after its establishment, and of course the most important thing was to recover the territory as much as possible. What is this kind of skin to eat? Also seeing the entry of the Romanian representative, Clemenceau spoke with embarrassment. It's up to me to tell Prime Minister Brezhnev this unexpectedly. Romania was asked to help Poland stabilize the situation not long ago, and now it is a little embarrassing to ask him to raise the issue of territory. Under Clemenceau's narration, Prime Minister Brezhnev finally learned the details of the matter. It turned out that Dmowski, on behalf of the newly established Polish government, formally presented Poland's comprehensive and detailed territorial claims to the peace conference. He suggested the Supreme Council, when a settlement of territories belonging to Poland is reached, we should start in 1772, before the first partition. He proposed that Lithuania, Ukraine should be unified to Poland. Galicia to the southeast, although not part of it before the 14th century Poland, but the majority of Poles in the region, should also belong to Poland. Also in Upper Silesia and Danzig to the east of Germany, Poland should also get a large Polish corridor to the sea. In the face of Poland's territorial claims, the French side of course supported it, and they planned to make Poland a strong enemy in the east of Germany. This war can be won, and the containment of its former ally Russia on the Eastern Front plays a decisive role, and there is no reason why France should not continue to do so. The United Kingdom, on the other hand, is firmly opposed to Poland's so-called territorial claims. Prime Minister George believed that giving a large swath of German territory to Polish rule would be the trigger for future wars. To this end he asked, if the Germans in Poland defend themselves against Polish rule, will the three fight to keep Poland's rule over them? He also declared that Germany would refuse to sign the contract if Poland occupied Danzig and Upper Silesia. In fact, this attitude of the United Kingdom is a reflection of his traditional policy of parity on the Polish issue. Britain did not want to see Germany weaken too much, allowing France to dominate the European continent. The United States, on the other hand, sees this problem in terms of the principle of national self-determination, and advocates classification according to racial data. As for the Galicia region involved, they advocated direct negotiations between Poland and Romania, which was also the victorious country that occupied the region. As for that government in Ukraine, it has been completely ignored. When Clemenceau finished speaking, Prime Minister Brezhnev went in directly. I'm sorry, we cannot accept Poland's request. We have an agreement with the Ukrainian government on the ownership of this area, and we cannot make a decision that violates that agreement. In the face of Prime Minister Brezhnev's merciless refusal, Dmowski couldn't help but say, 90% of the region is Poles, and you have no reason to occupy it. Dmowski, I really said this at the Paris Peace Conference. Dmowski's words, Brezhnev directly retorted. 90%? Where does this data come from? According to our survey, only 43% of Poles in the region, and the remaining 41% of Ukrainians. Another 16% is made up of various ethnic groups such as Slovaks, Romanians, Hungarians, etc. Seeing that Dmowski was directly slammed back by Brătianu, the negotiation collapsed. Clemenceau stepped forward and said, "We don't know much about the division of local ethnic groups, so let's talk about other aspects." Dmowski, awakened by Clemenceau's words, immediately changed the subject. "As far as I know, the so-called Ukrainian government was established on the basis of the Bucharest Treaty. The treaty has been abolished, so the Ukrainian government supported by Germany and Austria should also be banned." Point regarding Dmowski's new round of offensive, Prime Minister Brătianu said with a smile, "I admit that the Ukrainian government was established on the basis of the Treaty of Bucharest. But according to President Wilson's self-determination of nations, the region's Ukrainians have the right to choose whether to build their own regime, or to whom they belong." Brătianu's words are very clear. You deny the Bucharest Treaty, and I bring up President Wilson's national self-determination. As for whether Ukraine is willing to join the Polish government, this is a joke. No one wants to find a father to take care of them. Dmowski, who was a little confused by Brătianu's words, continued to say, "Your calculations are wrong. The Galicia region should be self-determined by itself." No, the region of Galicia should not be self-determined alone. It is part of Ukraine. We know that you and Ukraine have funds for withdrawal of troops, and this can be taken over by us. 2. Sorry, this is a resolution between us and Ukraine, and you can't represent the Ukrainian government yet. Okay, don't argue. Seeing that the two sides were red-faced and unwilling to make a step, President Wilson couldn't help but said, "At present, the Galicia region issue is a bit too complicated. Is it possible to postpone this issue and discuss it when Hungary is resolved?" In President Wilson's view, the current issue of Galicia does not belong to the scope of negotiations with Germany, so this issue can be postponed for later discussion, and there is no need to hold on to it. Prime Minister George, who has not spoken, agreed. This is a good way. Seeing that both Britain and the United States agreed, and that Dmowski had always been at a disadvantage in front of Brătianu, Clemenceau also nodded and said, "Let's do it like this. We will postpone the discussion on this matter." The words of the three kingdoms made Dmowski feel as dejected as a defeated rooster, while Prime Minister Brătianu walked out of the conference room with a calm expression on his face. However, after walking out of the conference room, Brătianu immediately pulled his entourage, who was waiting outside the door, to his side and whispered, "Go back to the embassy immediately and send a secret telegram to the country, saying that the Poles want to use diplomatic channels. Take Galicia." The entourage was shocked when he heard this. He knew the seriousness of the matter and immediately replied, "I'll rush back to the embassy to send a report." After finishing the instructions to the entourage, Brătianu still smiled and kept greeting other members of the delegation as if nothing happened. After the Galicia region was put aside, the process of the Polish issue accelerated a lot, and the border issues in all directions were soon negotiated. The final decision will also be placed in the general clauses against Germany. As in the history of the treaty with Germany, after more than 3 months of quarrels and compromises, a final solution was finally reached on February 13. According to the treaty, Germany ceded Alsace and Lorraine to France, restoring France's borders before the Franco-Prussian War. Northern Schleswig returns to Denmark after a referendum. Recognize Polish independence and grant Polish coastlines. Return the territory originally belonging to Poland, including West Prussia, Posen Province, part of East Prussia and part of Upper Silesia, East and Upper Silesia, to Czechoslovakia. Danzig is administered by the League of Nations, known as the Free City of Danzig. Ceded Uban and Samedi to Belgium. Klaipėda to Lithuania, 19 years. The Sarkol mining area was held in French escrow for 15 years, and then its ownership was decided by a referendum. Germany recognized Austria's independence, and could never merge with it. Recognize the independence of Luxembourg. The treaty cost Germany 10% of its territory, 12.5% of its population, all overseas colonies, including German East Africa, German Southwest Africa, Cameroon, Togo, and German New Guinea, 16% of its coal production and half of the steel industry. Military restrictions. The territory on the west bank of the Rhine, Rhineland, was occupied by the Allied armies for 15 years, and the Germans could not fortify within kilometers from the east and west banks. The army was limited to less than 100,000 troops, and was not allowed to have tanks or heavy artillery, eliminating the establishment of the German general staff. The number of navy personnel is limited to less than 15,000 members, and there are only 6 battleships with a displacement of 10,000 tons, 6 cruisers and 12 destroyers, and no submarines are allowed. No air force may be organized, no weapons may be imported or exported, and no chemical weapons may be produced or stored. In order to limit the number of people receiving military training, the compulsory military service system was abolished, and the service period of non-commissioned officers and soldiers was extended to 12 years and officers to 25 years. Responsibility for war. Germany must admit full responsibility for war and crimes against Allied civilians. Former Kaiser Wilhelm II was tried for war crimes. Some German troops were tried for war crimes, and some were sentenced to death. War reparations. According to the decision of the Allied Compensation Committee, Germany needs to compensate 226 billion marks, about 11.3 billion pounds, and pay in gold, and then reduce it to 132 billion Reich marks. The only thing that this treaty has to do with Romania is the issue of German compensation. However, because Romania did not suffer too many losses in the war, it only received 2% of the compensation. But Romania still has a long way to go to get the money. Chapter 397, Reorganization of the Army. After attending the Paris Peace Conference, the Romanian delegation did not leave. They also need to discuss the proposals related to Bulgaria and Hungary next. Among them, the territorial proposal related to Hungary is the most concerned by Romania. This is related to whether Romania's western territories can be advanced to the Tisza River. This is not the end of the occupation, and wanting to dispel Poland's appeal to the Galicia region is also the focus of Romania's attention. These all take time to talk slowly. But in the meantime, Romania needs to end its current wartime economy, and the dismantling of excess troops is also a focus of its attention. In the palace, the chief of the general staff, Admiral Prezhan, was reporting to Edel on the plan to reduce the number of troops. Your Majesty, our army currently has a total strength of 644,000 troops, a total of 45 division-level combat units and 14 brigade-level combat units. Independent heavy artillery regiments are brigade-level combat units. Among them, the army has 613,000 people and the navy has 29,000 people. This abolition will mainly focus on the army. As for the navy, the general staff also issued a document asking them to optimize and enhance their technical arms. Tell me about the standards for this abolition. Edel listened carefully, but now he wanted to hear the actual content. Okay, Your Majesty. Regarding Edel's request, Admiral Ploiesti skipped the previous part and went straight to the substantive content. Considering the stability of law and order in our newly occupied territories and the fluctuating situation in neighboring countries. Therefore, the purpose of this disarmament is to retain a strong army to deter potential opponents. Therefore, our disarmament this time will be mainly based on general mobilization, the formation of divisions after the designation of 60, plus other troops that did not perform well in the war. It is expected that we will cut about 200,000 troops. Edel listened to the words of the chief of the general staff, thinking in his heart, this is to cut off 1/3 of the troops. Considering the outstanding performance of the standing divisions in this war, the dismantled army is basically a fierce competition between the mobilization division and the militia division. This will make many officers and non-commissioned officers promoted by the line of fire be beaten back to their original shape. Edel's thoughts did not interrupt Prisham's remarks, but he continued, this time, the reduction of troops is mainly in the form of voluntary retirement. In addition, we will try our best to persuade the officers and soldiers who have excellent combat performance and good appearance remain in the troops, and the troops to be abolished this time are mainly infantry, and their technical arms will be merged into the retained troops to enrich. After finishing speaking, Prezhan took out a document and arrived in front of Edel. Your Majesty, this is a reference list for dismantling troops. Edel took over this list about the fate of officers and soldiers. Looking down on the list given by the general staff, only 2 divisions after the second batch of number 60 were retained. The first batch of divisions after the number 40 was also abolished by 3. The reasons given by the general staff are also varied. Some troops are not suitable for continuing to stay in the army because their soldiers have poor skills. There are also troops with low level of officers, which are not suitable for giving full play to the combat power of the troops they lead. In addition, there are also troops whose morale is not high and their will to fight is poor in the face of the reasons given by the general staff. Edel thinks it is still quite acceptable, because as far as he knows, these divisions after the number 60 have poor combat capabilities and have performed unfavorably on the battlefield many times. As a result, these troops could only be assigned tasks such as maintaining regional security and protecting army supply lines. After Edel read it, he signed his name on it and handed it to Prezhan. Just do what you want. Okay, Your Majesty. After receiving the list of the numbers of the abolished troops, Prezhan looked hesitant. After seeing the expression of the chief of staff, Edel asked curiously, "Can you tell me if there is anything else the admiral has to do?" Faced with Edel's question, Prezhan thought for a while and finally said, "Your Majesty, Romania has performed very well in this war. However, according to my observation, there are still many unsatisfactory places. For example, in the army, the mobilization of division and brigade level troops is slow, and the technical arms that have been strengthened for the use of the troops do not have a tacit understanding. In addition, compared with the German army, the related division level units in our group army are not cooperated enough." Admiral Pilishin always mentioned many problems of the Romanian army in this war. In the end, he said, "The biggest problem we have found on the battlefield is that the current division level troops are too large. The 2 brigades and 4 regiments are not flexible enough to mobilize on the battlefield, and many times there is a problem of too slow response." And Edel's expression gradually became serious after hearing the chief of staff's remarks. He also did not expect that there are many problems in the Romanian army, which seems to have a great record. So he couldn't help asking, "Chief of the General Staff, do you have any solutions to these problems?" Facing Edel's inquiry, Prezhan said, "Not yet, but if His Majesty thinks it is feasible, the General Staff can make a plan first. However, based on my many years of experience, if changes are needed, then not small at all, maybe similar to what we did in 2005. What Prezhan said brought the word adaptation to Edel's mind. No wonder it would make Pilishin, who has great prestige in the army, also feel embarrassed. Restructuring is a top priority, and it was restructured in the victorious Romanian army, which was no less than a major cleanup after a championship winning team. This was a highly technical task. If the changes made in the future will not be said to be worse, it will not meet expectations, and the ensuing pressure of public opinion can bring the framers who lead the reform into disrepute. It is because he understands this that Pilishin feels very embarrassed. This is to suppress all his reputation. Prezhan's location and loyalty to the kingdom made him unable to ignore the existence of this problem, so he said it under Edel's coercion. Prezhan's words made Edel feel that he did not choose the wrong person. It is too rare for a chief of general staff to have the ability and vision like Prezhan. So Edel thought of giving a little hint to His Excellency the Admiral. He said the 3-3 system that was common in World War II in later generations. What do you think about changing the 2 brigades to 3 regiments? 3 regiments. Yes, Edel couldn't tell him the benefits of the 3-3 system. After all, the technology and equipment were not the same in different times, so he didn't want to make a joke. What's more, he doesn't specialize in military control. He was half a keyboard military strategist in his previous life, and he almost forgot about it for so many years. These 3-3 systems are also his few remaining military memories. Facing Edel's suggestion, Prezhan replied cautiously, "In this case, I need to go back to the staff to study it." Edel can also understand that the Chief of General Staff is cautious in changing the military system. After all, he just said a military term, and he did not involve the command system of troops and technical arms. If you don't study it carefully, who can use it with confidence? The 3-3 system is not a panacea. Admiral Pilishin left after reporting on the dismantling of the army and his concerns about the problems and formation of the army. After all, the military affairs are already busy enough, so there is still time to chat with the king. And Edel is preparing to check the government work. After all, the Prime Minister has brought people to the Paris Peace Conference, and the government work cannot be delayed. When there is no suitable candidate, Edel can only accept supervision. Just then, a squire ran up to him quickly, took out a telegram and said, "This is a secret telegram from the Prime Minister from Paris, equals, chapter 398 entitled." Edel took the telegram and quickly scanned it. After reading it, he put away the telegram and ordered, "Don't go to the government, call Calist over." It didn't take long for Calist to come. "Over, your majesty, what are your orders?" Looking at Calist in front of him, Edel's expression was a little gloomy. This made the head guard think that he suspected that some work was not done well, which made his majesty angry. But fortunately, Edel did not let the rough and restless Calist wait for long, and Edel finally spoke. "Immediately send someone to investigate the Poles in the Galicia region. I will send a secret telegram to Admiral Salomik, and if these Poles in the region do anything bad, he will cooperate with you to carry out the action." Edel's words made the chief guard feel that everything was serious, and he couldn't help asking, "What is the standard we can do?" "There is no limit to the standard, as long as these Poles demonstrate and act immediately according to the first level plan." Edel's words made Calist's heart tightened, but he knew what the first level plan represented. This was the handling plan that was only needed when a rebellion occurred. This was also the first time that the plan was used, since it was formulated. It needs to be explained here that after Edel ascended the throne, in order to prevent various emergencies, 3-level plans were set up. The 3-level plan is a solution for the outbreak of small-scale public protests, mainly by the government. The 2nd-level plan was written as a solution to the outbreak of large-scale popular protests, which will be dealt with by the government and the military. The 1st-level plan is when there is a hot issue, and the government's reassurance efforts are no longer effective. The investigation finds that there have been rioting armed element in the area. Only then can the 1st-level plan be used. The policy of the plan is to blockade the area, to prevent its spread and flow, and then the army will destroy it with the cooperation of the intelligence department. It's just that this time the plan is weird, but it is used on Ukrainian territory. Calist has a hazy idea in his heart, but he must not dare to say this somewhat bold guess. So he replied immediately, "I personally lead the team there. Go. After sending Calist away, Edel looked at the Galicia area on the map and said to himself, "I hope the situation I worry about will not happen. Otherwise, the Poles, I will let you know the consequences." Yes, the telegram that Edel saw was the telegram from Prime Minister Brzezianu that Poland wanted to take Galicia from Romania. For Edel, who has seen the region as his own, the Poles are dying. In a situation where the Poles have the guts to provoke Romania, when they have acquired a large area of territory from Germany and the former Russia, and will be hostile to them in the future, it can only be said that the Poles are completely blinded by greed. However, the investigation into Galicia will take time, and Edel is also concerned about Romania's economic recovery in addition to waiting for the results. But Romania is currently turning around its current wartime economy, as evidenced by the massive cuts in the military, and putting it back into the development economy. However, this will take time, and at present, Romania's domestic industrial and agricultural production has not recovered significantly from the impact of the war. It can only reach 68% of the highest level before the declaration of war on the Allies, which is also affected by the general mobilization of war. However, the government is quite calm in this regard, because the development of the newly occupied territories will lead to the recovery of the Romanian economy. And there is another reason that everyone tacitly understands. That is, with the disintegration of Austria-Hungary, the defeat of Germany, and the discoloration of Russia, there has been a vacuum of interests in the Central and Southern Europe and the Balkans, which used to make them compete endlessly. The strongest country in the region is Romania. Therefore, government departments generally believe that when Britain, France, and Italy penetrate the region, Romania can also get a share of it. However, Kirachari, Minister of Industry, also pointed out that the current Romanian economy is relatively single, mainly exporting strong products of food and its processing industry, oil and its chemical industry and vehicle manufacturing, and many other products still need to be imported. Before Romanian territorial expansion, these industries were able to meet the continued development of the population and economy. But after the territorial expansion, these industries are somewhat powerless. At present, Romania needs more other industries to meet the continuous development of population and economy. According to the latest statistics of Romania, its total domestic population has grown rapidly from 10.67 million before the war to 18.64 million. The main factor was Romania's capture of Transylvania, Eastern Moldavia, which had voted to join Romania, and Hungarian territories east of the Tisza River and east of the Transcarpathian Mountains, excluding Galicia, Odessa and other places that are still in Ukraine in terms of law. In fact, these seized territories do not currently belong to Romania legally. However, everyone from the people to the government ignored this, and public opinion kept claiming that the region had already belonged to Romania's new territory. This can be seen in the reckless expulsion of Hungarians by Romanian soldiers in the area, with complete disregard for the attitude of the Hungarians after this integration of the new territory. Currently some of the new territories in Ed's heart, the current proportion of Romanian nationalities is 76.2% are Romanians, then 12.6% Hungarians, but this nationality is being driven away, so it will be reduced, followed by 4.1% Bulgarians, 3.4% Ukrainians, the rest are Germans, Slovaks, Poles, Jews, Gypsies, etc. From Romania's many actions on these territories, it can be seen that it is a must for this territory in order to fully develop the new territory and let the people in the region feel the dividends given by Romania. Kalachuri also suggested that the government organize a geological exploration team to conduct a systematic exploration of the new territory. In addition, the mining of coal, iron, gold and other minerals that have been discovered in Transylvania should also be invested in. However, the coal and iron in this area are of poor quality and not suitable for industrial use. However, for the prosperity of the region, Romania still intends to invest in mining, which can be regarded as full of sincerity to the people of Transylvania. Eda agreed to Karachuri's suggestion. Let him do it. Romania needs someone of his talent. In fact, Eda has been watching Karachuri, who has been active recently. However, he still supports the thoughtful minister. Different voices are needed within the government. At present Prime Minister Bricianu has too much prestige in the government, and is not a good thing, and after winning this war, apart from himself and a limited number of military personnel, he is the one who will benefit the most. And the war is over, and there really needs to be a different voice from the government. Edel was thinking about what happened after the war, when a squire hurried to him with a telegram. Your Majesty, this is a telegram from Budapest, equals, if you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 399 The Hungarian Revolution. Edel picked up the telegram and was pleasantly surprised by its contents. Yes, it was a surprise. The telegram said there had been a revolution in Hungary and a Soviet regime had been established. Edel looked at the telegram from Hungary and could only say that God helped me. In this telegram, the process of the Hungarian Revolution is described in detail. The 4-year war has brought huge disasters to the Hungarian people. The Hungarian ruling class organized 3.5 million troops to take part in the war, with an average of 1 in every 6 people participating in the war, of which 661,000 were killed and 734,000 captured. The production level was greatly reduced compared to the pre-war level. For example, the agricultural harvest in 1918 was only equal to 60% of the pre-war level. Workers' wages also fell, with steel workers' wages down 52% from pre-war levels. Commodities are extremely scarce and food supplies are very difficult. For example, in January 1918, in large cities, it was stipulated that every adult should supply 100 grams of bread per day. In June, this ration was reduced to 82 grams, and it was often not enough. In small cities, there is no ration supply at all, and the vast majority of people are suffering from hunger and cold, struggling to death. People are gathering in dissatisfaction under such circumstances. Among them, on November 25, 1917, a march of 100,000 people broke out in Budapest. In defiance of the government's ban, people held rallies in the city square, chanting slogans, "Down with the war. We want peace." However, at that time, the Austro-Hungarian government used our methods to suppress the will of the people. However, in this rally, the far-left socialists Otto Calvin, Scharamer and others, and the leftist land rule of the openly active Hungarian Social Democratic Party, established in 1890, and others, thus establishing a connection. They spread their ideas among mines, enterprises, trade unions, and soldiers on the front and rear, and with good results. Then in January 1918 and June 1918, 2 strike rallies broke out in a row, and each was larger than the other. After the time came to July, the Hungarian government represented by Tisza could no longer hold on to the national independence movements that broke out one after another in various places. He could only step down in the face of turbulent public resentment. Then a coalition government formed by parties such as the Independence Party and the Social Democratic Party in 1948 was established in Budapest. However, the new government has not solved major problems, such as the land issue, the equal rights of ethnic minorities and democratic reforms. This made it impossible to offset the grievances of the people. At this time, Lenin, who was busy with the civil war, saw the direction of shifting the pressure. He released the Hungarian Communist Party headed by Bela Kun and others, and also gave it a batch of funds to let it go. Let go of the revolutionary cause in Hungary. In September 1918, Bela Kun returned to Hungary from Soviet Russia with a group of communists who had participated in the Russian Revolution. The Kun Bela, whom Lenin had high hopes for, is also a remarkable figure. Born in Transylvania, he graduated from the Faculty of Law of the University of Karlsruhe. Worked as a reporter. In 1902 he joined the Hungarian Social Democratic Party. Conscripted after the outbreak of the war, captured in Russia in 1916, joined the Russian Social Democratic Labour Party in 1917. In March 1918, he founded the Hungarian Communist Group directly under the Central Committee of the Russian Communist Party, Brazzaville, and served as the leader. It can be seen from his experience that he is a character who is good at seizing opportunities. As soon as Bela Kun returned to Hungary, he used some left-wing social democrats, socialists, and prisoners of war returned from Russia to form the Hungarian Communist Party. Bela Kun, who had lived in Russia and had personally participated in the revolution, knew the importance of propaganda, so within a month he set up the Red. He vigorously advocated for Lord Lenin and the Russian Revolution, and advocated the division of land for the Hungarian poor, and increased wages for workers. Therefore, under its fascination, the Hungarian Communist Party developed rapidly, and within a month, it developed from a small organization that was unknown to the country into a large political party in the country. In the ensuing time, the Hungarian Communist Party grew like a snowball. And Bela Kun used this time to form his own armed Red Guards in an attempt to use it to seize power. Not only that, but he also received strong support from Russia. Hungarian soldiers captured by the Russian army during the war. These Hungarian soldiers, who had been trained by the Russians and fought against the Russian Provisional Government army, numbered as many as 100,000 in the Russian Civil War. Under Lenin's order, more than half of them returned to Hungary one after another through various methods, and joined the armed forces of the Hungarian Communist Party. This made Bela Kun even more confident, and successively release many conflicts with the government. For example, on December 25, 1918, in Chikmat, communist-influenced cavalry occupied the barracks and disarmed the officers. On the 26th, in Budapest, there were bloody clashes between workers and government armed police, resulting in some casualties. On the 31st, in some of the largest barracks in Budapest, there was another bloody clash between communist-influenced troops and troops loyal to the government. By late January 1919, armed conflicts were becoming more frequent in Budapest and in the provinces. The government ordered the disarmament of communist-influenced soldiers in order to tighten its grip on the army. But by this time it was too late, and the Communist Party's armed forces had already made the government's attempt to fail. At this time, Bela Kun saw the opportunity to seize power and launched an armed uprising on February 28. The Red Guards, to which it belongs, plus the soldiers under its influence, took advantage of the weapons in their hands to first occupy the fort on Mount Gallia, commanding the center of the capital from a commanding position point. Then they disarmed the gendarmerie and police, and quickly occupied various strategic strongholds, stations, bridges, post offices and government ministries throughout Budapest. The insurgents also surrounded 2 French regiments of Moroccan troops in Budapest, immobilizing them in the barracks. That's it. The Hungarian Communist Party took Budapest. And Edel saw this telegram, which was sent back by Romania's intelligence organization in Hungary. Edel looked at the telegram, but he was concerned about the reaction of the Allies. What if they insist on intervening on their own? After thinking about it for a long time, and having no clue, Edel instructed the guard, call the Admiral of Mount Ploiesti here. There are important things to do. Looking at the leaving attendant, Edel couldn't help laughing when he thought about the disarmament report he made some time ago. It is estimated that Putin will be furious for the Hungarians' move. But what benefits should Romania get from this time? Edel looked back and forth along the Tisza River on the map, and simply asked the Allies to confirm that the territory belonged to Romania. Edel was still a little worried about the delay in negotiating the division of Hungarian territory. Chapter 400 Intervention in Hungary 1. Of course, the news that the Hungarian Revolution had seized power could be received by Romania, as could the representatives of the Allied powers who were negotiating in Paris. In fact, in the evening of the same day, the news of the Hungarian Revolution was known to all countries, and US Secretary of State Lansing gave advice to President Wilson, requesting immediate military means to destroy the Hungarian Soviet Republic. Countries also do not recognize the Hungarian Communist government and impose a strict economic blockade on Hungary. The grain embargo stopped the supply of industrial raw materials such as iron ore, coal, and oil, and the trains to Hungary and the commercial ships on the Danube were suspended. At the same time, it also sent intelligence personnel to Hungary through Austria under the rule of the Social Democratic Party, and sent money and weapons to supply the rebels in Hungary. However, these measures can only be used as a plan to prevent it from expanding, and the real decisive factor is to send troops to intervene. As for the dispatch of troops, the American delegation proposed 3 options to deal with the Hungarian Soviet regime. First, the troops of the United States, Britain, France, and Italy occupied Hungary. Second, with the assistance of the Romanian, Czech and Serbian armies, organized armed intervention against the Hungarian communist regime. Third, with the help of the right Social Democrats, prepare to react and fight back. Faced with 3 options, the United States, Britain, France, and Italy decided to use the Romanian, Czech and Serbian armies around Hungary to take the lead in intervening. Because the Czech Republic and Serbia have a series of their own problems, the troops that can be sent are limited. Romania, which currently has 600,000 troops, is of course the object they rely on. So, in order to get Romania to contribute, Brătianu once again received a separate summons. This time, Brătianu walked into a parlor in Versailles under the leadership of his attendants. After he walked in, he found that compared to the last time the big 3, there was more Italian Prime Minister Orlando this time. However, Orlando's face is not very good looking. It seems that he is very unhappy that he has not obtained the rights and interests of Feumport and Dalmatia, and he has a look of watching the excitement. As a driving force to intervene in the Hungarian Revolution, President Wilson said to Prime Minister Brătianu, after entering the door, "Your Excellency Prime Minister, Hungary is currently being occupied by evil communists, and the local innocent people are suffering. This time we invite you have come to ask Your Excellency how Romania, as its neighbor, views this brutal incident." As soon as President Wilson came up, he asked Brătianu what he thought of the revolution in Hungary. In fact, Brătianu wanted to say that I wanted to move a chair and sit and watch. However, it is better to say less of such a cold joke, so as not to anger the big people in front of you. It is not good. Although President Wilson's question was a bit sudden, Brătianu, who had done his homework for a long time, answered with reason. "Everyone, our country is indignant at the fact that a communist uprising in Hungary overthrew the government. We are also deeply sympathetic to the suffering of the people of our neighboring countries. Bricianu first expressed his admiration for the misfortune of the neighboring country, and then changed the conversation. But at present we are not prepared for the turmoil that broke out in Hungary, so the specific response measures are still under discussion. When everyone heard Bricianu's words, they felt that the shrewd Romanian Prime Minister was not a simple person. After talking all over the place, the result is that there is no Romanian view on this. And the words are always after the discussion. It is intended that they will not express their position on this until they have enough benefits. This sounds unpleasant, but as a qualified political figure, isn't this what it should be? However, although Bricianu performed well, who is not a human being on the field, how could he give conditions so easily? I saw Clemenceau said with a smile, after he finished speaking, actually, these Hungarians, led by the communist thugs, resisted our will. However, Hungary, after breaking away from Austria-Hungary, has always been a small country, and it is not a threat to us. It's just that the armies of various countries are far away from each other. When our armies are assembled in place, it will not be difficult to eliminate them. Clemenceau's words. Everyone present nodded and admitted, this is the truth. It is not difficult for them to eliminate the Hungarian Revolution, which is also a warning to Bricianu not to have too many ideas regarding Clemenceau's words. Bricianu replied with a smile, Your Excellency, the Prime Minister is right. The Hungarians are indeed nothing to worry about. But we all know that the most powerful thing about communism is not their armed forces, but their ideas. They are very easy to spread like the plague, and their ideas have a fatal temptation for the bottom people. So this is a real threat. Everyone does not deny Bricianu's words. It is true that the lives of the people of the major European countries currently participating in the war have declined too much, which has made many people resentful. This violent Marxist thought from Lenin is too threatening to all countries, and it is very easy to spread at the bottom of the country. This is also the main reason why countries are hostile to Soviet Russia. Everyone is a capitalist country, and suddenly there is an alien state built by workers. Not only that, he also claimed to let the workers of the world unite to establish a new government, which is not to take the life of the capitalists. They didn't send troops to attack immediately, and thanks to this war, everyone couldn't move. Seeing that the French Prime Minister was also refuted, President Wilson suddenly said, Then Your Excellency Bricianu, under what circumstances do you think the Romanian army will be able to speed up the preparation time? This is to ask himself to make conditions. Bricianu's mind is spinning rapidly, and he is thinking about what conditions to put forward. Want to try it? Bricianu tried to say, I think if the Miskalk and the fund, which are owned by Hungary, are brought together and promised to be owned by our country, then our preparation speed must be very fast. This is impossible. As soon as Bricianu finished speaking, he heard Clemenceau's rude retort. The French Prime Minister said with a look of anger, the border of Romania can only be east of the Tisza River, which is a condition that cannot continue to be negotiated. If Your Excellency really does not make changes, we can only wait for the arrival of the French army. Intervene. We are confident that these Hungarians will know that the majesty of France cannot be challenged. Seeing Clemenceau's reaction, Bricianu was taken aback. At this time, Prime Minister George, who had not spoken, also said, This is also the attitude of our UK. The territory of Romania cannot cross the Tisza River. And I forgot to mention that Kidakin has been assigned to the Kingdom of Serbia, and it is no longer possible to give you guys. And when Prime Minister George finished speaking, President Wilson also said, Our country agrees with that. Seeing that the big three had all expressed their opinions, Bricianu knew that it was impossible to claim Hungarian territory. So he put forward additional conditions. We demand that we obtain the same rights as you after the successful intervention. In addition, the current territory east of the Tisza River must be assigned to our country in the form of a treaty after the intervention is over. Faced with the new conditions proposed by Bricianu, the three giants made eye contact, and then Prime Minister George said, Sorry, we cannot accept your request for equal rights in Hungary. As for your request, it is said that the territory east of the Tisza River will be confirmed in the form of a treaty, which we can agree to. Point after hearing Prime Minister George's words, Brătianu said loudly, "It's not fair to us, Romania." Sorry, there is no fairness in this world. We in Romania are not weak and cannot accept such a decision. After a 10-hour negotiation, Brătianu did not get much Hungarian interests from the United States, Britain and France in the end. However, in order to appease Romania's emotions, the three countries said that in addition to confirming that the territory east of the Tisza River belongs to Romania in the form of a treaty, Poland will also prevent Poland from making territorial claims to Galicia. In the face of the soft and hard persecution of the three kingdoms, Brătianu could only reluctantly agree, because Romania is currently inseparable from the support of the three countries, but he can feel a trace of the United States, Britain and France's three countries' vigilance against Romania in his heart. It seems that his territorial claim is somewhat inopportune. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.